Okay, here we are. All right, welcome everyone. Thanks for coming. So, yeah, the kind of I want to start today maybe just with we can do some introductions first, and then kind of lay out the aims of what's the point of having this kind of discussion and what hopefully we can get out of it. Um, Maybe if we do some intros, just kind of going maybe clockwise. So I'll start. So for anyone who doesn't know me, I'm Lee Jones. I'm kind of hosting and attempting to moderate all these lot. And I've kind of been involved in the UK and then Nordic scene for like I think about 4 or 5 years or so. I ran a weekly podcast for a while. I've done some journalism stuff. I've done some interviews. So yeah, a few different things, and that's kind of how I'm here. So yeah, if we want to go around, I think Jake, you're next.
Yo, what's up, guys? You know me. Don't really need to introduce myself. I want to tell you something about what I was doing that you might not know about. I was actually the coach of the Liberian badminton team for about 5 years. We got the Olympic silver medal in table tennis as well. I'm involved in the UK scene, not by choice, but by destiny. I run Ruddy Esports. I'm a caster as well. I cast major aspersions upon the weak minds of men. And I'm just an all-round good guy, to be honest with you. Thank you.
Cheers, Jake. I mean, it's not possible to follow this.
Yeah, good luck, Josh.
Look, I've been involved in the UK scene as long as there's been a UK scene, pretty much, with various different organisations, various different teams, under various different tournament organisers and formats, and lots of problems still persist that we'll go on and talk about, I'm sure. But firstly, as a coach for lots of years, and now as a player agent, and represent some clients that are in the NLC, so I've dealt with various different orgs within that. Some which are still remaining, some which have left. But yeah, that's my involvement in the NLC and who I am.
Froomie, you're next.
Hello, I'm Richard Froome. I've been in the UK scene probably just a bit less than Josh, but around for a very long time. That I've seen it all. I was a very bad League of Legends player who became an alright manager, who then turned into a alright League of Legends director, and I'm at Verdant at the minute. Let's try and fix the UK scene and the NLC, I guess.
It's like an AA meeting, this.
I've seen it all.
Well, I guess I'll go next. Be like, hi, my name's Nick, also known as Crane. I also started as a player. I think one of the first times I played was against Froome over here, Richard, in the Red Bull 5G a long time ago, about 6 years ago. Since then, I've worked as a manager for teams like Big, and then I moved on to be player agent as well as just like Fern, sorry. And I also founded the website called LoL Pros G. And as recently I worked, never heard of it. AKA what a lot of teams use as their scouting and nothing but. And most recently worked with Eminem in spring and a bit of summer. And now I'm here. That's about me.
Cool. So my name is William Roach, or Kaiprioska. I am the current product manager for the NLC. I took over in November of last year. Before that, I was doing freelance broadcast productions with my company SQ1 throughout the UK and Nordics. And then before that, I did some stints as a team manager and some marketing manager stuff as well. But at least that's my current role, is sort of leading the ship of the NLC, and have been doing that for the past year.
Cool. I'm Grant, currently Director of Esports Operations for Team Falcons out in the MENA region, but before this job, I was in similar roles for Guild Esports and XL Esports for the last 4 years, and just been around a little while in the UK scene, or certainly keeping tabs on it for a while in numerous roles and positions.
Cool.
One team which was called Last Remedy, which is maybe what we need
We're going old school. We're going old school.
What people don't know is that I was actually the substitute support player for Last Remedy as well.
Oh. Back in the day, there's always these little stories. Everyone has
know, right?
That's what I've always loved. I've always loved that about the UK, the ability to let Diamond 5 people play competitive.
Literally, I was Diamond 5 at the time, so you're right.
Diamond 5 was worth a bit more back then, to its credit.
I just remember back in the day, Diamond 1 got you the trophy. So,
True.
Right, so let me just kind of outline what the aims are today, because I think that's kind of been, something I think people have wondered a little bit, like what's the point of these kind of things? I know these kind of talks have happened before, maybe not really much has happened. So the idea isn't really just to kind of come here for 2 hours and just moan basically, and just say this is the issues with the scene, this is why it's rubbish, this is why it's shit, blah blah blah. Hopefully there'll be something that's actually kind of actionable, or some actual positive feedback to say, these are the things that could be done better, and yeah, basically just actually make some progress really. Now to start with as well, one thing I think is maybe worth bringing up about why is it a UK roundtable as well, and I've seen a couple of comments in chat, Viprune, what UK scene, which is maybe even like, do we even start there? Because obviously now the UK is joined with the Nordics, with the NLC. Is there a point of even thinking it of a UK scene anymore?
I mean, there's a UK contingent in the league, right? Which or should be, as part of the kind of the merger, and that is, I mean, if we're talking about that in specifics, even smaller than the NLC, that's definitely dwindled, both in strength and in numbers, right?
So for me, there's two parts to this, right? Like, you have to look at it from one perspective. Is it like stupid to have 8 people? How many people are there? Let me count. 7. Is it stupid to have 7 people that are all from the UK and represent the ideals and kind of wants and needs of the UK scene? Apart from maybe Kai, that obviously has to work more cerebrally, kind of encountering all the other different regions. Yeah, I think that's like massively stupid if our main goal is to kind of counteract issues that we see in NLC, because I think a lot of this show is in response to the most recent news that a lot of these teams are leaving. But I think if our goals today are to touch more upon, getting more kind of into the micro specifics of why esports in the UK isn't great, like console market, why League of Legends never really taken up. Like, if we talk about like getting involved more in like local markets, like schools, universities, things like this. I think if we're going to attach it to that, stuff like that, what we can do from the positions that we're in order to bolster League of Legends on the UK market, then sure, I think it makes sense to talk about it like Grant says, like Ferndog says, sorry, as a contingency. But yeah, that would be my general takeaway. It depends what angle we go at it. I think there is a point of talking about it as a UK contingent, but not if we're going to go at it from an entirely NLC angle.
I think, I'd say maybe where some of the UK shot comes from as well is which teams it is too. Like, you go back like 4 years, XL and M&M were the teams in the UK. So I think especially for those two to be gone now, I think for people that have followed the UK scene for a number of years, it is a shock, especially, I think.
I'm going to get my first hot take of the night out of the way. XL is not a UK org.
I think that's fair to say these days, to be honest.
Yeah.
The XL I knew and loved was very much UK org. It's a very different org now. But I mean, if we dig too much into just solely the orgs, I think we'll find a lot of changes.
Yeah. At the start of the LEC, right, there was what their branding was, wasn't it? Pushing that they were a UK team, had a UK.
I mean,
both
both of the LEC teams that were academies that were based in the NLC region were Fnatic and XL at the time, were both poisoned themselves as UK teams, right? Whether that's rightly or wrongly, that was the position that they were hosting at the time.
Well, let's maybe look at what the reasonings are then for why those teams are gone. If we're focused on those, so XL they've kind of said that their focus is on tier 1 esports, and that's what I kind of think the official line is. In Esports News UK's article, they did mention in there, it says they understand the decision has also been made due to the viewer numbers in the leagues, and then that's kind of like the age-old thing with the UK League of Legends, I suppose, has been the viewership issues. What are our initial thoughts on there then? What's maybe going right? What's maybe going wrong with actually finding these UK viewers?
Well, what's the point of what? So what I guess I start with when I think about that anyway, and maybe we go from different starting points, is why do they have academy? I mean, other than Riot saying you should need an academy team when the LEC started, what they're using academy teams for? What's Fnatic and what's XL? What's the point in an academy team? And is viewers a concern to them when they're being watched by hundreds of thousands on LEC as an organisation? Is the viewership really really an issue for them. So what is actually the point? What would we decipher as what we believe to be? If we start with Fnatic and Excel as what were the British Academy teams in the NLC, what are they trying to achieve with having an academy team in that league anyway?
Well, I guess for me, from my perspective, like the benefits of having an academy team is you have established names, right? For something like Fnatic is like kind of a household name. XL less so, but like still to an extent. You have like these flagship names in terms of like attracting new viewers potentially that might have not heard of the league. Then you have like that infrastructure there, the names potentially. It like allows people that are like fans of Fnatic to be like, oh, maybe these players might one day play for Fnatic. I should keep an eye on this.
But then what do the orgs want from that? Like, why are the orgs there? As in, what's their purpose for being in the league? I mean, obviously, other than like, what are they trying to achieve? Because they're surely not bothered if it's got 500 viewers or 800 viewers. Whereas some orgs that actually mean something. What's the?
I think you've prepared like this is a little bit of an Ouroboros, no? Because it's like they can't really be that invested because they don't get necessarily anything from it, and then they can't get anything from it because they're not necessarily invested. No? It's like a two-way street somewhat. At least from my perspective, I don't know what anyone else thinks.
The original goal of like the academy teams got lost somewhere along the line, where for LEC teams they're meant to be to actually bring talent through and be a production of talent, and Riot will work on the rules between to allow them to kind of switch between each other. And then the benefit to the leagues are, as you get, as Jake said, like established names that should help build the league. I think, for some odd reason that's been lost along the way, and they've kind of been branded. I mean, I almost wouldn't call them academies; they are their own local regional teams at this point that are just there, where some LEC orgs have gone with like massive names for their academy teams and vice versa, where some just go so small, so quiet with players that really won't go anywhere. I just think the whole point of the academy has been lost, and as a result as well, like if the goal of the academy teams was to do talent production, then the difficulty you have then for someone like XL and Fnatic is the NLC, the UK league, the best ability to grow those players within versus other leagues as well. If it's not for viewership, if it's not for brand, as it were, as well.
Sure.
So just following on from this as well, if XL want to essentially position themselves as a tier 1 org, an org that's pushing for Worlds, that's essentially 15 players that go to Worlds from Europe usually. How many players from the ERL ecosystem do you realistically think are going to be able to push for those 15 slots? I think you're looking at maybe 1, maybe 2 at an incredible push, and you're looking for absolute wonder kids if you're really looking for world spots, right? And so if that really is your goal, are you realistically going to be able to develop the talent in any ERL system, not just NLC, in my opinion? And I think that kind of is maybe one of the contributing factors towards it.
Yeah, sure. I mean, Rogue. I mean, there may be opposing views to this, but Rogue is probably one of the most successful academy projects in terms of promotion to contend, winning LEC, and then players going to watch players like Trimby, for instance, players like Inspired before he obviously went.
Gosh.
You muted the stream.
Sorry.
Oh,
sorry.
Right. More than like 2 orgs joining, which had effectively going to put in more than 10 times anyone else's budget, with only 2 EU Masters slots up for grabs, meant there was a system where it's almost predetermined who was going to take the EU Masters slots. It wasn't exactly working out like that way, but it almost meant that the other organizations that were not academy teams didn't have much to invest for, because they're competing for a 3rd spot effectively. Because even if they spent like, I don't know, 2.5k a player or something like that, which is high for NLC, for the most part weren't going to be able to really compete with Fnatic and XL, and incentivized the point in actually investing, right?
I do get that. Sorry, go on.
Yeah, so the resource gap was too big for the other teams, really. Like, it had gotten to a point where being crowned the best team outside of Academy, although it sounds like a meme, that was actually like quite a prestigious title in the league, because there was no way you were going to touch Fnatic or XL with the resources and players that they had. And with it being like you said, Fern, 2 teams go to EU Masters. Back when it was the UKLC as a standalone league, it was 2 teams go straight to the main stage. It was a pipe dream to think, okay, we're going to get ahead of one of these teams. I think Diabolus, which is the less said about them, the better. But they were an org that managed to do it once. But apart from that,
there's odd and anomalous
remember
bits,
it.
right?
Trick did it as well.
Guys, so
Yeah,
can
yeah.
we put a little mute
Exactly.
on VOD Ninja because it's picking up loads of stuff in the background. Sorry.
Okay. But for me, if the academy teams are going to put in that much resources and be able to dominate the leagues, they needed to be pushing the league more than they were. Because I felt like when the UKLC was the league that it was, and even the NLC to an extent, Fnatic were very poor at pushing the NLC. Very poor at pushing the NLC. And so were XL, maybe to a lesser point, but given Fnatic's influence, you would have thought that they would have been able to push the league a bit more and extend to their fan base and help generate a better following for the UKLC, but that never really happened. And even now, Astralis, as the newer academy team, they're just as guilty. And I think that if the academy teams really wanted this league to be on the branding level of, say, Germany or Spain, I think France would always be a bit too far. Then they needed to push it harder, and they definitely had the following on socials to do that, and it just never happened.
Yeah.
Well,
So,
go on.
do the academy teams in those other leagues, are they necessarily the driving force behind how they got to be so big?
No.
No, I think
So does that
And-
argument stand?
The thing that grew France, Spain, Germany is one thing the UK doesn't have: big content.
Yeah.
Big content creators get involved in the
Influencers.
league, whether they're casters or they're owning their own teams. Like Germany was the biggest ERL. You go back a few years because
Yeah.
of the caster, and because he had like Brokey and Norway playing well.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest problem about that is the 2 biggest people in the UK. One of them is a nonce, and the other one is Officer Naughty. So, you've got a major issue there. He's got about 247 followers, and 4 of them are his aunt and his friends.
Sure.
So
Well, I mean, pre huge influencers getting involved in the likes of Ibai or Kamato over in Carmine Corp. These leagues were still like, I mean, every single team had a gaming house. Every single team was paying 5 players full-time wages. There was prior to these huge influencers now in the last couple of years getting involved, these leagues were still bounds ahead, right? I mean, that's exacerbated the problem.
My friend
in terms of
James,
the gap, but it's not new.
Yeah, my friend James has got a good point in the chat. He does a lot of stuff for Ruddy at the moment, by the way. Shout out to James in chat. He's saying a lot of the times I see, and this is like something. So I've been in the UK scene since 2019, 2020, but I've like seen it before. I was like part of it when like UKLC was like on BBC Three, and that was like a massive deal. Like, that made me want to like maybe play comp at some point. I was like, wait, I can play League, and then my dad can like watch me on BBC Three. That's fucking sick. But from what I see for a lot of these orgs, like I don't know who you guys are hiring for social media, but some of these people are the biggest charlatans and semological complete disasters I've ever seen. I've seen some of these accounts. I saw a tweet from Dusty the other day. Not to talk shit on the Dusty guys because I like them, but I saw a tweet from them and I was just thinking, like, who have you got to do this? Like, you've got 5k followers and it's a tweet that's been up for 27 minutes. It's got 1 like. Like, I would just delete my whole account. I would change the password and throw it in the sea, mate. Like, it's actually just unacceptable how bad some teams are at social media. Like,
no, sure.
Well, because we saw obviously NLC did the social class this year, and Riddle won, and it was CJ that won just single-handedly.
Yeah, the funniest exchange about that was between Gleedy and CJ, and it was Gleedy saying, "Well, to be fair, mate, you've got a full-time social media position," and then CJ just goes, "Yeah, you're right, I do. As long as I work a 9-to-5 job 7 days a week as well." Like, it's so easy to do. I'm telling you guys. I would be able to, spending an hour a day, win social class in the NLC, and I wouldn't even break a sweat on my bollocks. It's not hard. Like, the resources required just to be decent at doing social media and like making short little edits that like do facial masking and whatnot. It's despicable. Like, and that social class thing. Big shout out to Kai for that, because it was actually like, that was such an intelligent way of doing it, because it was like, not only is it like a competition, but it also like shines a spotlight on every social media manager that's like stealing paychecks and is really shit at their job. But it still didn't matter, because they still didn't do anything.
That's what I was going to say. So the whole point of that is obviously to incentivize it, and you see a few orgs, or a few even just people in some of the orgs that kind of took that and run with it. And like you say, if that still didn't stop some teams from basically just doing nothing. So what? How do we like make teams start doing
it must be important, right? It must be they don't see that that's important to not do it. Like, I mean, that can surely be the only reason why they don't put any effort into at all to that side of the things, is that they just don't value the time spent versus the growth that they would possibly get or not get from that.
Time spent versus growth. This is like such a stupid bit. This is basic economics. You go into something, you piss a load of money out the wall, and then you act like surprised when you don't get any fucking ROI from it 30 minutes later. Like, I know that the TOs are shit. We can wow about it all day. But if we're not creating, like, bro, the bare minimum is making something so which people can actually develop a fan base for you. Like, I don't know, the academy teams never did it because it was like they were getting forced into it and coerced. So I can kind of understand it, but also go fuck yourself. But then beyond that, the orgs themselves, why is no one trying to create a fan base for themselves? Why have I never seen that in the UK scene? Like,
so I can follow up a little bit from this. So obviously the social clash was essentially one of 3 segments that we did to try and identify the fact that the teams still struggle to build up their fan bases, to sort of market themselves correctly, to actually get themselves out there as a brand. Because obviously when you look at the other leagues, for example, what they have that NLC teams don't have is fans. Essentially, none of them have it, and I've said this to the NLC owners themselves pretty candidly, like, hey, when I turn on the NLC stream, how many people, diehard of your fans, do you think are coming to watch? Because, hey, Riddle's coming, hey, Veneer's coming, hey, X7's coming, right? And the answer is, it's not a lot. It's not going to be in the triple digits. It might not even be like 25 for some walks, And so we identified that, hey, they're kind of struggling to brand themselves. Let's give them the tools to do it by doing this social clash, or by rewarding what happens on social media. Let's give them the fan of the street segment, which was sort of an idea that came from the whole Arsenal fan TV phenomenon that happened a couple of years ago, with the idea of, hey, let's give you a super fan, and in the hopes that potentially you realize that you don't actually have to be the fan of the street for that week to put it on your social media anyway, and just have a mascot. And then the last one was, we saw that we had a 30-minute countdown and absolutely nothing happening in it. And I said, okay, let me use that as a giant advertising platform for any content that you want to make, whether it be social media, whether it be videos. If all 10 orgs say, hey, we want to put stuff on there, sure, I give you 3 minutes each. If only 2 orgs do it, but one org gives me 20 minutes and others 10, cool, great. I've now filled up that half an hour. More people are going to come watch the NLC, but more importantly, more people are going to be exposed to your product and the stuff that you're doing. And then just moving on to the second point that DonJake made, which is about, how hard is it to get someone to be a social media manager? And the answer is not hard, right? You have to do essentially a little bit of scouting, a little bit of asking around, potentially a little bit of trading people up. And I think it was you, Josh, that said, people think it's not worth it, right? But why don't people think it's worth it?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that that's the case, but that's the only plausible explanation I can have for why they don't try and brand themselves.
Yeah,
is that they just don't think that the time is worth it.
But what I'm saying is, like, I think that's quite a reasonable suggestion what you're putting forth here. But the thing is, there's obviously an idea behind why people aren't thinking it's worth it to invest the time into getting a social media manager, if not potentially multiple social media managers, right? And that's because they don't think it's worth it, or they don't think maybe it's worth the money, or potentially they don't think it's worth the investment. But then it's a case of, okay, well, maybe they're lacking the knowledge and the education to show them that it is worth it, right? Maybe no one's actually done it properly yet to show them, like, oh my God, this is the actual key that we didn't realize was there, And I think that actually my main issue in the whole UK scene and why it's gone down over the years is I don't think we have enough education and enough expertise in our scene. I think we have a lot of people that potentially mean well, but potentially aren't going out and hiring the people that have the expertise to actually make a proper game change. And if not, they're not acquiring the skills that allow them to go up to the next level, right? Like for me,
70 million%.
Yeah, and for me personally, that's the main thing that I've identified in the NLC region, and I've already relayed this to all the teams when I want to start doing some workshops and some meetings with them later on the rest of this year. That's going to be my main focus, and I've already relayed this to Riot as well. Like, look, I think, and I also just mentioned about this isn't just an NLC problem. This is a ERL wide problem as well. Even some of the bigger leagues, and it's one of my big focuses for the next year in particular. And so at least when I look about why we say, it's a shame that this org isn't around or this org isn't around, at the end of the day, if they had the expertise to either have the business acumen or more knowledge or skills, or manage to hire someone that could unlock a certain aspect of their business that they didn't know about, potentially they'd be here today. And at least I think this is sort of the core issue that we've seen in UK sports in particular. Like, I don't think, that everyone's necessarily terrible at their jobs. They could have just been, very average at their jobs, or maybe they're great at one thing, but missed a certain aspect that they couldn't do themselves, but also didn't have the resource to hire, And so I think this is sort of a big problem that addresses sort of the core issue of why this roundtable was sort of brought together.
But
this
I
is
think
sort
it's
of
also a
main.
pride issue. It's a pride issue as well.
There's some ego and pride. You're right.
For me, one of the big things in the advent of franchising is you saw a lot of people go from kind of what was a collated role. Like before, you would have like in the old scene of like Challenger Series, a lot of time you'd have like your coach was also your manager who's booking your scrims, or like you had like, and then in the kind of dawn of franchising, it's sort of a weird blend where you have one person that's doing like 5 or 6 different jobs. Maybe they do like X, Y, Z, and there's a weird thing now where like everyone's just like, oh, I can like do this myself, or bro, like your social media manager or like people that does like outward like reach in terms of like your community manager, stuff like this. These are like the most valuable roles in your company if you're like starting out at ERL level. Like results are nice, and if you can get results as well, that's like wonderful. Of course, a lot of that will come down to like your return of investment. Like to be honest with you, like you have to kind of create that in different ways. The prize money isn't necessarily there. You get a stipend, and then beyond that, whatever. But like for me, like bro, I think one of the points that I think it was Nymira said in chat, like these people aren't treated like and valued in the way that they should be. 100%. Like I see so many people that like aren't even just casters, but like could be utilized as like content creators or people that could like push segments for you. Like they just don't ever get used or given a chance. Like not even to speak from like purely anecdotal because it sounds like I'm being narcissistic and talking about myself. Surprise, I am. But in any case, I for like 2 years was trying to push like a load of stuff, and I know people like even like Officer Naughty back in the day, like he was obviously doing that for an org, but there are so many people like that. Like I look at like Middlecourt. Middlecourt's a really good example of this. Like no org is willing to just be like, hey, here's like a couple £100 a month, like make a couple videos for us. Like it's so like it's not an insane amount of money. Like it's so cheap to do.
So I'll say even this, right? I know the expectation with the UK League of Legends scene is that we should be a monolith, right, amongst the ERL ecosystem, that we should be right up there with France and right up there with Spain. But the fact is, like, right now, we're not, and the infrastructure isn't there and not comparable to those levels. But we still have the same kind of expectations because for some reason, that's just how we view ourselves. And, good on us, we want to reach the best, so it's not all a bad thing. But there's also, like, I think people also think that you need these masses of resources to do it, right? And sure, I said go get people with expertise, right? But you can also get people that are passionate and that, have expertise that you don't know or are learning along the way as well. And you can use them. DonJake made a great point, which is you have so many casters that would love to be an ambassador for your team, that would love to be a content creator for your team. So, like, just to use as an example, my sort of freelance broadcast company, SQ1, right? We essentially started with a league that got shut down by Riot. We pivoted, started doing broadcast stuff, and we became essentially the #1 place for casting talent to get sort of opportunities within the NLC region. And all we did was when we started this, we had the philosophy of, hey, We're going to make sure that everything we do is as professional as possible. That no matter if we're like streaming a game that's Iron 4 or EU Masters play-ins, we're going to try and give you this. We're going to endeavor to give you the best quality possible. We're always going to endeavor to do the best thing we can. But you would have basically a half an hour interview to get into SQ1 because I wanted you to realize, hey, if you're getting into esports, we want to treat it like an actual job. We want to train you up properly. And at the end of that interview, I would tell people, hey, just so you know, we have all these opportunities for you to cast and get your name out there and stuff, but we cannot pay you. We have absolutely no money. We have no money, no backers, nothing like that. But we will always endeavor to give you the best environment to learn and to professionalize. And if you ever get the opportunity to earn more money or any money anywhere else, take that instead of us. There will never be any hard feelings. We will always promote you. We will even give you recommendations to these jobs if you need it, right? And for about a year and a half, we did all these things, and that was just a model that worked, and people wanted to keep going back to us because we were synonymous with doing stuff right, doing stuff honestly, and doing stuff as a professional manner, even though we had no resources. And don't get me wrong, some people eventually said, hey, I want to only do cast stuff now, I can't do stuff for you. I'm like, okay, cool, that's totally fine. We shake hands, say, if we had money, we'd love to pay you, but we can't, and that's it. And even if some of the orgs started off like that, say you took DonJake when he only had like 200 followers, right, on Twitter, and you said, hey, I think there's something about you that's kind of entertaining. I think your character's great, and I can see that you're getting engagement on Twitter. We don't have any money to pay you. I'm going to be completely upfront with you right now. We have no money to pay you right now. We would love to be able to pay you in the future. We would love the idea of being able to work with you. We using you with our team to promote our team, become an ambassador for our team. Here's the thing. Yeah.
No, but I don't massively agree with this, because although I do think in good faith,
I think you have to do it in good faith. But here's the thing: you have the right to say absolutely not. I'm not interested, right? But there will be some people that might potentially be interested, and I'm not saying that they should and people should work at exposure, right? If you can pay them, you should pay them. That's just how it is. But I also understand the limitations of what we're currently dealing with in esports, right? At least in the UK scene.
My problem is that I think although this can be interpreted and utilized as a vehicle for like good things, this is also the #1 method of some of the most horrible people within the space to utilize. Hey, I'm just trying to do you a favor. Like, listen,
sadly, you're not wrong.
You go on this little journey with me. We're gonna turn you into a superstar, kid. Like, I had this with so many orgs when I was starting out. By the way, like, listen, like, hey, we've got all these big things. Like, listen, I want to like next year we've got these investments coming in, these sponsors. We've got a big studio. We want you and your friend. We want you to make that cool little rap thing that you do. Like, we want to make it for us. Like, please do that for us, guys. And then it just never ends up happening, and you just realize, oh wait, I was doing unpaid labor for 4 months, and like, oh, this thing just didn't know happening. The problem is, although I do like the idea, and like, fair enough, maybe you've utilized it to use it for your own means in your model that is like goodwill, but this is just not a general thing that people can use, because there are a lot of scumfuck bastards within
I think you're right, to be honest. Actually, maybe I'm looking through way too many rose-tinted glasses because of what we managed to achieve at SQ1.
Yeah,
but,
this is just not the thing. Like,
yeah,
I could name so many
maybe
people
you're right,
that have done similar things like this. Like,
so if one thing to point out then, so is we're talking about a situation where we want to pay for talent, whether it's £50, £100 a month, whatever it is, there's some element of investment that needs to come from us, right? So then as a result, you do need to see an ROI through viewership, through, as a result, partners, whatever financial method you make money through as your org. My like, not to steer us another way, but like, my question generally is, as Kai, you mentioned about how like the viewership's gone up or down, or whatever. Like, has there ever been a viewership capable in the UK that is sustainable for anyone to be financially sound? Because even going back to UKLC days, even going back to like ESL Prem days, this, that, and the other, have we ever been at a point
right now?
Yeah, like, have we ever been able to say that the UK audience has been cultivated or strong enough, just UK LoL as an audience, we have a cultivate strong enough that all these orgs, like Jake, you're doing now, and all these orgs coming through, have an audience they can genuinely build and create that will be sustainable? It's lovely that we talk about a few hundred here or a few hundred there, but like, if there's going to be investment, you unfortunately need to talk about thousands, and no one's made that happen. Right? And final note on top of that, the fact that we've seen teams like M&M have success in pivoting towards a game like Rainbow Six, the fact that we have an org like Tundra with its UK roots here not even looking at NLC as an option. Like, we have orgs that have seen success from within the UK. A lot of Rocket League teams have seen success from within the UK that have not looked at League of Legends as a way to make that happen. My concern is they just don't see the audience there. Like,
and even worse than that, they're moving away. Like the ones that are moving away from it. Right?
Well, exactly.
Not only just the ones that, but I mean, so I think something that the NLC with you, William, and being involved this year. I mean, you can talk more about the actual growth in numbers, but this growth 12 months ago, if people asked, "Oh, what do you think?" Because to be honest, we had a million different ideas, a million different kind of tests and trials, but nobody has seen growth in the NLC region like we've seen in the last 12 months, right? I mean, you can talk a bit about that and how much that actually is in terms of numbers. You know better than I do.
Yeah. So
where does the money go from investments? When you I know, so you're talking about, I'm rephrasing your point somewhat, which I'm sorry about. But obviously teams have invested. Like, it's obviously not an entirely tenuous situation. I can understand why teams wouldn't want to invest. I think part and parcel of that is that they've seen investments go so horribly wrong before. I've seen so many teams come into the scene with a lot of money and then not necessarily, crash and burn before. Where does that money go? Because for me, a lot of the time, I'm not seeing any of it go particularly towards anything that would create sustainability.
Player salaries.
Towards player salaries. Yeah. And then you don't do anything with the player salaries.
I mean,
player salaries, and then player asks for a bit more to stay, and that's it.
Is that not acquiescing to a sustainable market, or is that contributing to an unstable market?
I think it's contributing to an unstable market, because, like, at its core, esports is something that bugs me with some orgs. Like, esports at its core is a person product, right? We don't have a tangible thing here. We're selling a belief, an idea, a fandom. Come follow us. Why? Because it's fun. But we don't have I know you got merch stuff, but like a tangible reason to follow us. So what you're investing in is staff. Like, there are other things, facilities and softwares, but it's players and it's staff. And the thing with players as well is, for me, is sure, some of them are going to be content creator-esque and kind of add value that way. But esports is a method to take what is a following and a curious fan base and actually turn them into monetized followers, right? So you don't often come into an org to follow them out of interest because of a team. You come in because of content and influencers, and then you see these teams, and then you like the idea of being involved in competition, and that really converts you from short term to long term.
So
it's got to be investment staff.
Why have I barely ever, if ever, I'm just going to say with the qualifier, if ever, in the case that I have and I've forgotten, why do I never seen teams that spend all this money on players and then never use the players as a vehicle? Because I completely agree with you. I agree with that. Interest is conceptual at the point you might follow a team for a player, but then you follow the team because of the player. Yeah. But no one is ever utilizing, like, I know we said at the foot of the show in the green room, like, no to calling out individuals, but I didn't necessarily agree with that at the time. Like, for me, let's use an example of something like an X7. Why have they gotten a world champion and probably the most established UK player of all time in Kasing, apart from maybe one other person, and I haven't seen anything collated within their brand? They are probably paying them a fucking fortune. Yeah. And there's nothing being created alongside that. And that's not just a them thing. That's in every single org I've ever seen in the UK scene that came in with money from external places that then pissed money up the wall on players. Why did they never do anything alongside the personalities they create? And don't give me the argument that some of them are boring, because Riot Games in like 2013 were making some of the most boring players into star-studded people. Do you think any of these people that used to see like Maple Street or any of these people on LCS, do you think those are interesting people that you'd want to get a drink with? No, it's a talent in of itself that you need to cultivate within your company and find someone that you can potentially help to do it, to make uninteresting people interesting. You can do it by the vehicle of editing, of video, of ideas, of creativity. There's not really an excuse. Like,
so I think it's a mixture of, sometimes orgs are more result focused than media focused. They think that by winning games that'll generate their platform.
I mean, always, right? In every
yeah, that's why
it doesn't work though.
Yeah, that's why they invest in these players. Winning does nothing. We've seen it over and
no
over.
One's gonna remember Dusty.
Like, winning is a shortcut to. It's a shortcut to success in this industry, because it can get you a bit of a following quicker and it can get more eyes on you, sure. But if you don't have the content strategy, the influence strategy, and the conversion strategy built, it does nothing. It does absolutely nothing. It's just going to get you there quicker.
You're pissing money up.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we're talking teams that have been paying rosters. I mean, legit 25k a month in salary, right? 25,000 euros every month in salary has been paid to some rosters in the UK, right? That's a fact. And I've like Jake said, I've not seen any of that used as a vehicle to grow to grow their product or their brand or anything. So
I will
yes, I mean,
also
that's the pure fact of it.
Yeah, but my
I will
point
also.
is, I'm sorry,
hang
I'm
on,
just trying to
Jake.
keep someone in the yeah, cool.
Yeah, give me a second. All right. There's also one other pretty terrible factor within this current ecosystem as well, which is all these teams are putting all this money into essentially developing these players, right? Essentially, it's not just player salaries; you're developing them, right? And then say you start off right, and you say, "Hey, we're spending 20k a month on each of these players, right?" And you had your 11th month contract that ends in November 1st, whatever, right? What happens on November 1st? Every single one of those players goes
free.
LFT. That not a single player goes for a minimum
Yes.
free release clause.
And they
you get
lose for free.
absolute, yeah, you lose all the money you spent, all the investment you spent is gone. And I think this is a big problem that I see. And this affects not just NLC, I think it affects like even all the minor regions as well. Like essentially all the time you spend on developing these players, if you're not essentially you're on a timer to do exactly what Grant says, think about your conversion strategy, because as soon as it hits that last day, gone, like the pumpkin goes back, like it's the Cinderella story. It's like, cool, I had a great night at the ball, but now it's all gone.
It's hard because what you say is exactly correct, and that's why you need a strategy that's going to convert player following into your following, right? You need to be successful regardless of players you have, and it certainly helps if you have player personalities that allow you to get to that point. But if you're not using it, you can't. It's really tough because, like in football, right, you have that set of rules where if a team poaches a player that's under 24, regardless of contract, then they get a fee. We don't have any of that, so it's always going to be tough if you're. It's going to be tough regardless if you're relying on developing talent. So in the nicest way, you can't rely on that. Like your investment into talent, I think you either have to get them somehow on a longer term contract sell, which is very difficult with what we're paying. So then you just have to have a content / media strategy to invest with the players you have.
There's a world where you can have longer term contracts and a tiny buyout, like a small buyout, right? That is achievable by other small
Wait, I'm confused. Just to the general point, is this a problem with you can't do this or people don't do this?
People don't.
Like, you're not allowed to have
do
it.
No.
So what the fuck are we saying? Why don't people just do this? Like we have buyouts in our clauses in Div 3.
Actually, can we? Okay, so actually,
Yeah,
Josh,
sure.
you might be able to answer this a bit more, right?
Sure.
But essentially, most people don't do it because that way you're going to have to pay for their high salaries during the off season as well, right? But also on top of that, it seems like they're actually very difficult to enforce these actual player buyouts, as far as I understand. Like, Josh, can you speak to potentially like
I think
how many of these actually get enforced?
I mean, so in Tier 1 League of Legends, it's a transfer market, right? Like a traditional sport for the most part. Most players have more than 1 year deals, and therefore, when a team doesn't want a player anymore, they put a price on the player's head and try and effectively sell that player to other teams. And that recoups some of the investment, right? Or in some cases where they sell a player who they didn't pay very much because he was a rookie, they actually get more, they make a profit off that player, right? And that can happen. That isn't happening at an ERL level to the same level. I mean, it is the more developed ERLs, it is happening more. So LFL teams are selling players to the LEC all the time. Superliga teams are selling players to the LEC all the time. They're part of their income or an income and selling clubs being a selling club as an ERL team can be profitable because I mean if you've got a decent buyout, a buyout that's achievable by LEC teams, and you've got there's 10 clubs above you with a huge amount of funding that will take your players and they will pay for them. They're happy to pay 100k. They're happy to pay 150k. I mean, Haru is an example of an investment by X7 where they spent a lot of money each month and he was sold to Vitality for more than they spent on him in spring, right? That's just it. So he's a profit to X7. Players don't want to be stuck, quote unquote, at small orgs, and therefore they take in their heads they don't want to be stuck at orgs that are going to be like mid-table NLC or something of this nature, and therefore they refuse to sign longer-term contracts. And a team will invest a small salary, whatever that salary is, and it will come October, November, the player doesn't want to be there anymore because maybe they played really well and another team from a different league wants them, and the player goes for free. I think every team should aim to buy and sell all their players, and the whole transfer market should be seen as the last option is we're going to let this player go as a free agent, but the first option is let's sell them for 500 quid. You know what I mean? Like 200 quid, whatever. I mean, because as soon as that kind of starts to happen and you sell one player for 200 quid and you have 200 quid in your pocket, maybe you buy your upgrade player for 300 quid. You know, and then that player sells for 500 quid, and you're actually like starting to like it can be tiny amounts of money almost, very manageable amounts of money for even low resource orgs. It may be literally in the low hundreds of pounds, but players have a value, and you can then start to reinvest that into your roster or invest that, and maybe that money goes into the social media side of things, whatever it goes into. I think what we should kind of focus on in this conversation a little bit more is, so these teams are dropping out of the NLC, both Nordic teams and UK teams, for what reason? Right? What is the true cause of why they decide that they don't want to be involved? And I guess ROI is probably number one, right? The actual investment of what they believe they put in compared to what they get out of being in the league. And I guess they don't see a longer term future of getting out more of the league as time goes on, or they don't have the resources to carry on much longer. So they decide that League of Legends is no longer profitable for them. I think we need to then look at how can teams generate more ROI, which routes do they go down, and which ways do they currently make money, right? Which ways do teams currently make money? And at the moment, they're fairly reliant on your payments, I guess. Will, right?
Yeah.
Well, that can't be the only that can't be the only thing, right?
Well, it is.
It is.
How else are they meant to
I
make
mean,
money? How else are they meant to make money? Like,
I mean,
The
they
only
have to
reason-
make more money than the stipend, though, right?
The only
They have
reason
to
they are
spread the
pulling
work.
out
So
is because they are not seeing an ROI at all in this league, unfortunately. Like, for
well,
the
can I
longer
just
term.
the number one business model is sort of like we have this like there's this weird like crab in a bucket mentality of like look at Singularity for example. They just went, wait, we can't make any money. What's the business model here? Should we maybe like think about like attacking a domestic market and like going individually, like looking at like maybe getting involved in schools or like local communities to like actually garner a fan base, or like doing content? What's our media plan? What's our strategy? What can we kind of like get involved with? What can we attach our brand to in terms of like no, they just went, wait, let's just like make this like fake university students program where we don't have to pay them any money, and like that's our business model. There's this weird like thing of like how do we avoid putting effort in? Like that's the number one thing I see. Like how do we cut corners? There's a lot of like extreme laziness.
Yeah, Singularity
No,
should never
I
have been
agree.
allowed to do that, to be fair. But in other ways, you talk about a business model and how do you build a business model. In the ecosystem that exists at the moment, the uncertainty is so high with the way that things have been done over the past couple of years, whether that be down to Riot or the admin teams or whatever, that a lot of orgs from the outside, like Grant spoke about, are probably looking at that and going, how do I know how much money to invest or whether I should invest in this if the rules are changing all the time and orgs are just getting cut and everyone's moving away? Like, it's no surprise that to me that in recent years we've seen more and more orgs turn their back on the league when the league is so unpredictable. Just over a year ago, we had the calibration tournament on a whim where orgs had already been told that should they reach a certain point in the league prior to that, they will be safe. And then all of a sudden, Freaks for You come in. And I'm not necessarily saying it's Freaks for You. It could have been imposed on them by Riot because of the minor and major ERL changes. But all of a sudden, they're told, okay, it's only the top 6 that are now safe. The rest of you are going into a calibration tournament. Orgs had not planned for that. It was an unprecedented business measure that they hadn't planned for, that all of a sudden they have to pay for their players to come back and try and keep their spot in the league. And a lot of teams fell away from that and decided that at the end, I'm not joining this league anyway. In the lower divisions, which aren't watched as much, in NLC Division 3, which is what Verdant were working out of last year, midway through the split, well, even later than that, 10 days before the promotion relegation tournament, we were told that only one team was going to promote when we were working on the precedent that it was going to be 2. And the admin's logic was, well, we want to run an NLC Division 3 winter split, and in order to do that, we need another place. So we need to hold another promotion tournament, therefore leaving one team in limbo. Like, how can orgs predict for this? Like, how can they be ready to invest their money when the rules can change on a whim? or they can just decide that regardless of whatever happens in the split, we can just bend it and break it. Not to mention the instabilities of the revolving carousel of TOs that we've seen over the past 5 years.
Yeah, that's exactly why Resolve just never looked back after what happened to them in when the league got shrunk from 12 teams to 10. They just, why would they, right?
So I mean, that was a very like tumultuous time for everything that went on in the league, right, and across the ERLs in general, right, because there was a standardization process of the whole ERLs that we're gonna try and standardize what happens throughout all the ERLs, both format wise, both try and align broadcasting so they're not all on the same nights, trying to align all the rules, so on and so forth. So I think that period. I mean, while there was casualties for sure, there was, whenever you go through that kind of standardization process of making 10 leagues all similar, all have similar formats, similar amount of teams, so on and so forth, there's going to be kind of a nasty, I guess, kind of casualty system where people become victims of that. But it's then from then on, what stability do you have now you're in the league, or if you ended up in Div 2 or whatever, what should you invest to actually try and get Div 1, or is it going to change again next year?
You still have to have a grace period for these sort of things, though. There has to be more notice than what was given. Like, it was just dropped on them at the end of the year. It's like, haha, we're changing everything. Not to mention the teams that were trying to promote. Talia Masters got scrapped, and they weren't even given a chance to... Wait, no, I think Talia Masters went ahead, but the promotions didn't. Like, there had to be that grace period.
This is a flaw in how much Riot
Talia was decided. I think Latch's team was going to play, and then they found out they weren't going to play later.
Yeah,
this is a flaw in Riot's communication with teams at an ERL level, and that's happened forever. I mean, like even now at EU Masters, the most prestigious ERL tournament, right, of any above all the leagues, teams still find out their group like 2 days before they play or something. So there's an element of poor communication from Riot, whether it's lack of care or whatever, at that level. Underneath the pie of the LEC, the ERL pie in itself has to be kind of better thought about and better considered to ensure that the individual pieces within that really understand what's going on
but
early and
last year, apart from the Baltics who were amalgamated into Ultraliga, the league that was affected the most was the NLC because this calibration tournament was forced on them, and that created instability in the region. And the first thing we need to do is get the league stable in order to grow it, in my opinion. Like, if you look at the LFL and the Prime League in Spain, they didn't have to go through that calibration because they already had 10 teams. We were the only team. We were the only league that had 12, and I think a grace
Our
period
league was furthest away from the standardization, right? Our league was the one that was furthest away from where they were trying to standardize it to. For sure.
This is gonna,
okay. I mean, yeah.
So I was going to say this is going to sound really harsh, and I really don't mean to come across that way, but in the greatest respect, does this matter? Because, and the reason I say that is because was the viewership great before things like this happened? Was it great after? We've reached a point, 6 years of this now, between all the different formats, all the different shows. We have, as Jake put it, some teams who haven't been bothered, haven't cared, so the audience has been lost that way. We've had some situations where good teams have bad staffs, they didn't invest. We've had some situations where we've lost good teams because of how the tournament's organised, just as you said there, Froomie, someone like Resolve, perhaps. We've hit a whole bunch of points. We've reached a point now where the audience isn't interested, but hasn't been interested along the way, and we're now stuck, which is why I spoke about a full reset. Like, my question, perhaps more to this group, is not necessarily how do we make the NLC or UKLC everyone to feel better, but like, how do we grow the UK League of Legends audience? Because for me, that's where we're stuck the most. Back in the day, I said back in the day, like 6-7 years ago, when I remember Riot did that League of Legends event at the Insomnia. I forget what they called it, but it was
IG Fest! IG Fest!
Joe Crism was on stage with Dyrus. Tell them! Joe Crism was with Dyrus. People were interested. People were watching. We had really cool opportunities in terms of Riot's investment into the UK scene as players and following, and then by proxy we should get an audience off that. We haven't had that from Riot for years, and we've all been fighting over the tiniest slice of pie, good or bad, however it's gone. Like, my genuine issue is, like, I don't think we have an interested audience in UK League of Legends, let alone the language barrier, which I can touch on, where we're losing people to the LEC in England.
Yeah, people from Birmingham.
Yeah, but it's just, again, like, why would you watch NLC if you can watch the LEC product when both products are so synonymously in English? Like,
so
you just don't have reason. It's really stuck.
This is the one. If I could just jump in, this is the one thing I understand. It's always used as an argument to why UK League of Legends has kind of struggled, because LEC is obviously the default language in English, right? But if you're a French-speaking viewer, you're just going to watch the French cast of LEC. Why are you watching NFL? If you're the German one, you're watching the German. I don't think that's one argument that always gets levied. And ironically, one of the first questions I got asked by Freaks was, "Hey, do you think the fact that you're an English-speaking league and the fact that LEC is in English, do you think that's a problem to why numbers have been so low in the past?" And I went, "No, I don't think that's at all the reason why. Like, I think."
But sorry, I'll let you finish. Sorry.
No, you go ahead. No,
so my but on that is the groups that are responsible for casting in the respective languages in other countries have become synonymous with the local league in their own right through partners. So partners are investing in that producing group, who by proxy can invest in the league themselves. And number two, those people on those casts, they become influencers, they become names in their own right that then gets attributed to that local league as well. So the problem you have is these people that Riot's farming out production to, that is in another language, become the face of that league and can really connect with the local league as a result, which unfortunately I think we get stuck with in the UK because, and it's not like a TO or producer's fault, like we just have that loss where partners are willing to invest across.
You are the N'Golo Kante of this roundtable. This is you man are getting smoked off. What's going on?
I want this to work.
I think there's also potentially a good argument as well that you're making, Grant, right? Which that's what I haven't considered until just now, is the fact that also in all those different language casts, the people who do the LEC in those languages also do the native ERL as well, right?
Yeah.
So you get to know them as the face of the LEC in their default language plus the ERL, so they're gaining sort of twice the exposure,
worlds.
twice of
and
worlds, and everything. You're right.
Cool. So in tandem to what Grant was saying, what I wanted to kind of go into, and I think it's a good point the Doctor is in the chat as well. Do you not think that somewhat that a problem is that a lot of the advertising is centered towards LEC, for example? Like for me growing up, I never heard about the UK. The way that I heard about the UKLC, I've kind of been brought into the UK scene by complete chance, to be honest. Whereas a lot of you maybe played like like Gfinity tournaments or like whatever, like I forget what all of they're called, all those weird things that you guys play in Portsmouth where Divinus is like the best player somehow. But in any case, the way that I got brought into it is I just like randomly made friends with Jamada and then like Officer Naughty, and then they like brought me in. There was no like external like sponsorship for me to like be able to like watch like it being on BBC. I knew like what XL was like somewhat, and I knew what Fnatic was obviously because they had a big presence in other games. But like for me growing up, strangely people like I hear all these people saying like, oh, UK like has no LoL scene or whatever. Bro, like there were like 50 kids at my school that played League, and like I know that to be the case for a lot of other people I know. There's actually like quite an audience like there, but there's just like none of them know what NLC is, none of them know what UKLC is, none of them knew what ESL Prem was before that. And the thing is like, how do you get involved in that? Like like how do you
there's an established university and college scene, right? But amongst themselves,
there isn't. For me, there isn't. No, there isn't, because the point here is Josh Furndog. The point is, if you are cultivating a university scene, you're already cultivating people who are interested in the game. This is not a new viewership thing. If you wanted to do this is something I talked about Veteran about.
These people don't watch the NLC, do they? I mean, a bit like you. I guess.
Know, but my general point is, if you're talking about a populace for UK League of Legends, you're not creating new viewers, which is the problem. You need to create a revolve. There needs to be more people coming in. You don't get involved in universities. You get more involved in schools, like things like Riot, things like that. Other companies, partner companies need to get involved. Local events, communities that actually allow people that might not even play League or might be in the inceptions of playing League. This is a major difference you have between the US or whatever.
But we're not even capturing the people that do play League.
My point is, sure, that's true, but you can also capture people that don't even play League or are at the beginning of it. Once you're at uni, you're already far into like playing League, being interested. You're sort of at the end of where you would be along the marketing kind of conveyor belt or whatever. You need to start at the inception of it, because collecting at the end is like, for me, will just always give you yes yield.
Sure.
Right. Where should we go next? Maybe one thing.
I think.
Oh, go on.
No, go on, Lee. Go on.
I was going to say, just when we were even to kind of bring it back then to where because we said a bit earlier, why are the teams dropping out then? Because it almost seemed like each four of those dropouts kind of gave different reasons, and the one with the M&M one was the current UK economic situation as well. So, barring a general election before a year's time,
I guess Crane can probably talk more to why M&M might have dropped out, right? Or no? I mean,
yeah, I mean the economic situation in the UK is obviously, as we all know, dire. And and I mean, I can't speak. I haven't been completely involved in the decision to leave the league because I wasn't working with them at that time. But during the time I was with them, it came down to A, the return on investment, and B, the economic situation in the UK.
if the return on investment for the teams increases, all of those teams stay, right? Surely, every team.
Probably, yeah. I mean, yeah, that's a no-brainer, really, isn't it? If it's making you decent money and growing.
Yeah, I mean, not make huge money, but like the return on investment is not as poor as it is right now. Then that's probably the number one, in my opinion. Well, I would have thought the number one sticking point of whether these teams actually stay or not, or whether teams in any league stay or not.
Yeah,
is the return on that investment.
Yeah, but I mean, I can't speak for every NLC team, right? But pretty much a lot. I have to imagine most of them, they put money in. It's literally just going for a sieve, just draining out on the other side.
The only way they take money out is the stipend, right, or stipend or whatever. That's the only money that they're actually bringing out, and that more than that is invested back in on just player salaries, staff salaries, coach salaries, whatever. And then they finish where they finish in the league. The players all go off to different teams, and okay, well, we got the stipend and also lost money. What happens next season? Do we invest again and just it's a rinse and repeat for a lot of these orgs, which they're seeing losses each year. So, I mean, to me, there's either the stipend increases to the point where the teams actually just live off that, or they need to make money in a different forms, right? Through different means, they need to get they need to see a return of investment in different methods. What are those methods? We spoke about the social media. Jake has spoke quite in depth about the utilization of upcoming kind of effective influencers or content creators, people that are going to build some level of entertainment around the brand. What other methods can these teams use to increase the return of investment, other than just relying on the league's payment to them each year as a means of staying alive?
So,
well, in a way, I guess. Sorry.
Sorry. So, I think this once again goes back to education expertise, right? Right now, the teams can't find a business plan that works for them, right? Because they don't know how to find that key that is.
Do they even have business plans in some of these cases? I
can't speak for them, but obviously, in some cases it doesn't necessarily look like it. But here's the thing, right? Okay, sure, maybe you can't go out and get someone who's amazing, but sending a DM on Twitter saying to someone who's been in one of the regions that have gone through this process and won from nothing to being successful now, and saying, hey, can I have 30 minutes of your time? I'd really love to pick your brain about some stuff. You can ask for expertise, ask for it doesn't have to just be complete darkness. You can say, hey, I need help. I don't know what I'm doing. I need, someone to shine a light, someone to give a hand out, someone to reach me, give me a way to start looking, some kind of resources. And so I don't think it's necessarily a case of, hey, it's a doom spiral of, hey, it's impossible to make ROI until the stipend sort of increases, right? I think that I think it's logically impossible that there's no way to make money at this current level. There must be some way to make money at this current level, and someone somewhere must have the key and the expertise to unlock it, and we just haven't found it yet, or people aren't looking hard enough.
My take is that you've increased the value of the NLC, right?
Of course you haven't found it. What are you doing to find it? This is
no, I agree. Their business. They hardly have
Monty
a business.
Python and his collaborate effort. They were better at finding the Holy Grail than UK esports teams. You're looking for this Holy Grail of how do we find money? Where are the efforts being put in to find it? We just all complain about you literally wake up every morning with your mouth open for a fucking pigeon to shit in it, and you're like, oh, I don't like the taste of this. What is going? No one is trying to find
the
a
effort
solution.
at the moment.
It's just disgraceful. It's disgraceful.
The only effort that's being put, so they are putting effort in, but they're, like we said before, they're only putting in effort into winning the games, right? That's the only effort that they put into, which doesn't. So there are rosters. So Dusty's roster this year, right, was a very good roster, built very well, very intelligently around the winning games route. They won games, right? Whoever it was built by, I mean, in reality, it's Dusty's roster. They won games with, and that was their view on how that's where they invested their money and their effort, right? Because there was effort invested into making that team good. So there is effort invested, but it's only in that one direction rather than multifaceted kind of. This is an organization that's got to make money in different routes rather than just winning games, because winning games is not enough.
So if you're talking about trying to come up with new monetization techniques, I think what we spoke about is people are not thinking of the monetization strategy towards they're getting into. So we're talking about really small scale here, right? So if you're going to go down the let's win a game route, to a few thousand viewers, as it were, which is the case here, then the way you get monetization out of that is a partner who's interested in that viewership. And the problem is it's too small a number for any partners of importance to be interested. So it's very hard to get. So then you just need to branch out different ideas. Are you going to go down building some sort of tournament platform route? Are you going to go down let's convert this into content route and be able to effectively sell the content? Are you going to take this down I hate to say it, but a blockchain NFT, not that I understand any of these words, but buzzwords. Like, are you going to take an NFT route?
You had me until then.
Exactly, but what are the unique monetization ways you're going to come with for the size of the business that allows you to get something out of it that you must do? The problem is it's so easy to look at win trophy, get partner, which doesn't work at this size, but that's all people can see narrowly because that's how it's been.
Generally,
so we've got to come up with new ideas.
Small kind of clubs in anything else, it's localization, right? It's making yourself relevant in your local area, which then can attract small businesses, small kind of I mean, whether that's going to the colleges, the schools, a local kind of little fan base that they don't. That the reason you support your local football team or whatever is not because they're the best team in the league or they've got the best players or they spend the most, but because there's something that attaches you to them, which is where you are. Right,
emotional investment.
Where you are in the world.
Exactly,
there's an emotion.
From my perspective, this is exactly why I run the way that I run Ruddy with Harry. Obviously, we're pretty close. We've only started 5 months ago, but a lot of what we do and what we want to do is we're very tied to a place, an identity, a brand, and something that can be it's accessible on a wider market to an extent because everyone can get down with the kind of irreverent nature that is being unabashedly from London and all of these things.
There's a foundation of your brand, which is where you're from, the localization.
It's a cultural hub that kind of exists alongside places like LA, New York, big cities like that. So it's an idea, it's an identity. For me, from the onset, it's always been about how do we represent via social media, via the videos we make, via the way that we communicate, we carry ourselves. How do we do that? I don't see any teams that are tied to a local identity. That's a major problem for me. I remember.
How used to be.
And then they can't get that. Of course, they're not. Well, yeah, of course, but I mean, then they can't get these.
That's so much bigger scale. So that's bigger scale. We're talking about what works at our scale. A bigger scale, the amount of investment Excel's putting in, they can't get the return on a British audience, which is a whole different ballpark in terms of our issues with British.
I don't think branding it like that means that you even have to just go to their audience, because what Jake's saying, what they've done with Ruddy, going out and doing these grime diss tracks and that. Obviously, that's a very London thing, but that doesn't mean that only people from London are going to look at that and think that's cool.
We dropped that diss track, and there are people that now watch Ruddy games that don't play League. There are people that have never played League before that watch us play.
What you're doing.
I know we're not massive, but every time that we play, there's at least 50, 60 people in chat spamming for us. And maybe 10 of them don't even play League. And we've done that just by having a brand. Do you know what I mean? There's a guy in chat that likes us from
the
Finland.
Brand. I don't think even needs to. Does it need to be something specific even to an area? You think a lot of the
you have to have an idea. I mean,
there's got to be a foundation of your branding, right? A
foundation of your branding,
and a lot of
name me a UK org that's ever had a brand that actually has a conceptual idea behind their brand and what it represents. I'll wait. What was Resolve's brand? What's X7's brand? What is Excel's brand even? I don't even know what that brand is particularly. None of these teams massively have a brand. They just sort of climb the ladder, and whoever manages to get out of the bucket over the other crabs is the one that ends up getting successful. I don't see from the onset a lot of teams having an actual conceptual understanding of how to brand yourself.
I feel like M&M is maybe the only one that was
Eminem
be
is
doing that.
actually
Like they had their
Eminem's
thing
like a
was
pretty
the
decent example of this. Yeah,
the
100%.
UK trying to link, and then they would make merch, make some nice clothes that have stuff with that link and with that theme still going as well. And that's
100%. And that's like step one. The problem for me is you don't necessarily go to like step 2, 3 from that point onwards. I know there was a point in which, like 2017, 26, when they were making like a decent amount of content that I think needed a slight bit of more creativity for me. But I know they made like a lot of content around. It was that team that had like Rifty Kadir when they all moved into that gaming house in like the middle of nowhere. I want to say it was like near like Coventry or some shithole, but anyway, like doing Leicester, that's the one. It's not even a shithole. I don't know. I've been really. It's actually like not even that bad of a place, but like stuff like this was actually like a good start. But then I think the problem is, it's just them doing it. You don't necessarily get too much of an ROI, which then I can start to like. For them, I think they have an excuse to be somewhat disenfranchised because although I don't think they did a great job and they can do better, you have to do better to do better. At least they gave it some effort at the time, and then slowly as surely as time has go on, they've become more and more disillusionized. The rest of you lot, like the rest of these UK, what have you ever done? Like,
sure, I think what I'd like to kind of I guess speak to here, and that we haven't really spoke about yet because we spoke about a lot of what some of the orgs can do. We can definitely touch on that more. But William, I think I mean, from my perspective, from someone who's not attached to an org now, right? I'm attached to players and I deal with all the orgs, but I'm not attached to an org. I think the NLC is better to watch this year than it has been for quite a long time. From a production standpoint, from a kind of talent and analyst standpoint, I think that you need to tell me the numbers on the actual kind of growth of viewership and stuff. But what's to say that is now with after 1 year of you guys being necessarily involved, that there's actually a growth, that there's actually potential growth for this to continue growing, because it's grown exponentially in terms of viewership, right? I mean, these viewers are coming from somewhere, and you're attracting them way more than any other tournament organizer has done in my knowledge. I mean, you can tell us some of those numbers and what I guess you guys internally feel like you've achieved this year, and then what you'd expect next year from that, because then maybe there's people watching from orgs that are like, should I get involved? You know, like, what the fuck's going on? And
can I add a further question on as well? So through that investment, where do you see the successful investment from your side, William, like convert those viewers? Like, where is that extra viewership coming from in that sense through your investment?
Yeah, sure. I can talk a little bit about it. So going into this year, essentially the NLC lost 6 out of 10 teams from 2021. In terms of like the total reach that we had on Twitter, combined all the teams in Division 1, we went from about 3.5 million Twitter followers down to about 1.2. So we lost about 70% of our Twitter reach as well. Obviously, the biggest one being Furneaux, which was massive for us. As far as I know, last year, every time I looked at the stream, I would see somewhere between 800 and 1,200 people watching NLC. I did some changes to the talent pool just based off the fact that with SQ1, I was basically fostering talent anyway, and there were some people that I thought could use some chances, maybe freshen some stuff up, because personally I thought the old broadcast was getting a little bit cookie cutter, in my opinion, and I thought there was a lot of people that were essentially giving me what they thought a caster should be, rather than just being themselves and being a little bit. I told each of them, like, hey, like don't tell me, like, don't, when you're out there, don't give me hip brain, give me Jake, give me your personality, give me a reason to. What I say to all my casters, give me a reason to give a fuck, because before I don't think anyone did. In terms of like viewership numbers, my personal goal was, I said I wanted to hit 10,000 people watching the NLC by the end of year 2, and people
would have laughed at you a year ago, right?
They thought I was fucking crazy. They thought I was insane, and we hit that over 4 times this year within 10 months.
Amazing.
With the peak being at 14.5k, I believe. In terms
what
of
you're
like
doing is working, right? Like that's just undeniable. What you're doing over the course of a very short period of time so far has I mean, that stream, those streams in particular, that peak is more than 14 times what you're seeing before. So there's viewers coming from somewhere.
Yeah, I mean, obviously that's a peak, right? Like on average, we had between usually about 3.5 to 4.5k, so we're up several hundreds of percent, and so the average,
I mean, you're probably nearly 300 to 400% up on what.
Yeah,
what you
roughly. Yeah, I think a lot of that was essentially when you're trying to sort of hit these peaks on a sort of promotional aspect, you have to do a lot of things like in-client, Twitch front page, and I think I did manage to unlock the kind of successful key to really boost the numbers, particularly in summer, and actually get like the perfect amount of promotion hitting all the right times that we got sort of consistent growth. I think we broke the record, for example, in summer split on week 1, week 2, week 3, week 5, week 8, week 9, and then several times in the playoffs as well, in terms of peak and average. Every single time we were just getting better and better and better each week for summer. And then by the end of summer, it wasn't uncommon to have over 5k people watching for the latter half of the summer split and also for the playoffs, which was, when you consider just how much it had sort of, how low it was the previous year, it seems kind of unfathomable. And then on top of that, you have a bunch of orgs that have come in with essentially 1,000 followers on Twitter or essentially unknown names.
Sure.
I think that we performed miracles, basically, if I'm honest.
I think the NLC product did its job this year, and now we're seeing orgs drop out. But this for me is the first time, and I think this is really important. This conversation, this whole conversation with all of us, because this actually, like we've said this before, and then next year there's been no more viewers than last year. We've said this before, and then there's been no change in the actual thing than last. But there was clear change this year from on the whole product. So the product is a more valuable product, without a doubt, no questions asked, than it was 1 year ago.
Yes.
So, I mean, we now need to, this team's dropped out, as we know, but now it has to be, one, obviously you guys continuing that growth and riding that wave, but two, how do we create, this is going back again, but how do we now create a world in which the orgs are in it? Maybe they're losing in the short term, as most times you join anything, you're losing in the short term, but for a sustainable future. But what does that look like for organizations? How can we achieve that? That's ultimately what any org wants to join. It wants to create that, don't they? So that's what we need to kind of find the actionable solutions for. And we've touched on some of them in lots of different ways in this chat already. But that's really like the route we need to go down, is how does this become sustainable for any team?
Oh yeah, don't get me wrong.
If I could just interject on this point. So when you look at the viewership numbers, whether it's 14k peak, 5k peak, or average 3k, or if you've got 400 people watching, there's always the same amount of people in chat. And chat is always, I don't think you can disagree, it's always pretty dead on an LLC stream. You get a message every few minutes sometimes. If you saw such a huge increase in viewership, why would the chat not be more active compared to that? Like, where are these viewers coming from? And if there's so many more people watching, why are none of them typing in chat? That's something I've always wondered.
Sure. That's actually one thing that also stumps me a little bit as well. Like, our chatter numbers were up from last year. I know that we definitely got some more people from the Nordics region getting a bit more involved in this year, which wasn't the case from last year. But in theory, like, it just seems like we just don't really like to use Twitch chat as much as other ERLs, from what I can tell, because we're definitely getting the numbers and we're definitely getting more people to start caring about them. And each stream I see someone type maybe once, because it does say, first time chat or first time view or whatever. And when I'm sitting in the control room, I see it, so many times during every single broadcast. But the problem is, like, I don't really know if chatters are the best metric, because if you just have a bunch of people that have copy pastas, does it really mean it's engaging, or are they just following people? Like, we had the exclamation point Torok. Like, just because people are spamming Torok or people are spamming like a thing, does it necessarily mean that they're more engaged with the product? Like, this is also one thing that I want to know is also, do people go into watch parties in Discord, and because they're using it in a social setting, are they talking? Honestly, I'm going to be completely honest with you. I don't know how to measure. Yeah, I just don't have an answer. I don't know how to measure the chatters. I don't know why there's not more
what
people
we're saying
talking.
is
I
they're
can
not bots,
speculate,
right?
but
That's the cynic in the UK scene. People in
no.
the past is that
Ironically,
not bots.
Ironically, the day that we hit the peak, I thought we were getting botted, and I had to ask Twitch, and we weren't. So luckily, but
like that's the cynic
I
of the
think
UK.
a lot of it is potentially embedded, though, even if it's not botted. I think
a lot of the time back when it was the LVP days, it would always be on the front page of Twitch, and when it was on the front page of Twitch, it would go up a few thousand extra views.
Yeah,
Which NLC has reached a few times, so you get a couple K extra for that.
We usually get about like a 2 to 3.5k buff if we're on Twitch, but it also depends on. So for this year in particular, for summer, I managed to get the majority of days for 2 hours, so I'd book it for the second and third hour in particular. But just because you're on the Twitch front page doesn't mean that you get the buff or the bump, basically, because there's a carousel when you first go to twitch.tv with about 5 or 6 different streams, and basically you only get the buff if you're on the very center of that carousel. So you can so some days where you're on the front page, but you're actually not on the front page, and you're just there like, come on, put us in the front.
What's the reason we can't get on the client anymore? Remember, we used to be able to get on the client back in the LVP days.
When you say on the client, do you mean you could watch it inside the client?
There was a
every time you
would advertise if you log
every
in.
time you open the client,
click
all over your face.
Yeah, okay. So we did have that for every day, but the problem is now Riot have a system where it's essentially you get like a priority. So if there's not a new champion out or an event out or MSI out, then basically then NLC will be the main thing you see when you log on to the thing. If not, it'll go down to a smaller box in like the corner, like there kind of thing. And then if not, you have to click on a separate tab to find it. And it all depends basically on what Riot are promoting that day. But every day, like I basically at the start of each split, I send in all the graphics and I say, hey, I need it for this day between this time and this time, this day between this day. And I just book the entire split. And then they say, thank you if we, we'll put it on promotion, but it just 100% is on whatever the priority is for that day for Riot inside their client, basically. So some days it'll be front page. Sometimes it won't be. If there's like a Star Guardian event, then say goodbye to any being on the front page for about 3 weeks. So yeah, it basically depends.
Gotcha.
I have 2 things to say, but I'm trying to remember what the second one was. I have ADHD. I'm sorry. So the first thing was, I think in terms of talking about Twitch chat and engagement, I think I agreed with what you were saying to an extent, but I think brushing off engagement in the form of Twitch chat is kind of a little bit sus for me. I think chat is mega important for a stream, because although I do agree, like, if Worlds has 400k viewers, like probably there's only like 10, 20k people typing at a time. So like, obviously you're gonna get way less yield. For me, that speaks to, like for me, engagement in chat is endemic of a wider problem. One of the reasons I think whenever we play, we get a lot of spam and whatever is because we have actual people that are there to watch us and give a shit. So like for me, if you're not getting much engagement in chat, it just means that like people are watching it to watch it. They don't necessarily give a shit about like a team in specific. They're just like watching the product, Which for me speaks to you need to create more reasons for people individually to give a shit about the teams. Because I don't think any of the teams in NLC, a wider problem is they don't have fans. Like, are there any teams that I've never seen? Actually, Veneer, I used to see a lot of people spam for Veneer. That's like maybe one of the only teams ever. I would never see. Like, bro, when we played against Astralis in the Aurora Cup, we were literally like, who are you to them? And they're a massive org compared to us. Like,
to add on to that point is the fact that, and I'm quoting Officer Naughty in chat here, but Rainbow Six streamers talk about for M&M would get 8k viewers, so less than this peak we spoke about here, but yet they get 100, 150 times the interaction, right, with regards to their social media, their commitment to Rainbow Six as well. So it's like, it's touching on Jake's point, it's like, even if you have the viewership, it's clearly just not converting it anyway at all to something more than that.
Thinking about fandom, right? I mean, I when I was coaching in Spain, and this is a long time. This is back in 2017, so this is way before the UK scene was ever like doing very much at all. I was in Spain with G2 Vodafone, and I remember going to LVP live events, and we would at their live events, the league's live events, each team would have like a half-hour slot where their fans could come and sign the posters. Right, each team could, whoever was at that event, whoever they would come and they would have a signed poster with the team and maybe a photo or whatever. I mean, each team probably had a queue of between 75 and 150 people each time that they get. Okay, that's people at the actual event. But what I'm saying is, even back then, there was localized kind of fandom for these teams, and these teams are not LEC teams. Part of that, and this is where UK struggled resource-wise, is that each team was centralized in as much as they had their own gaming house or office or whatever system they had where their players lived together, and therefore they would attend local gaming cafe type things, local I don't know, little Clash event, like we got Clash in the UK and all that. Not Clash, what's that? The game beyond
Belong.
Belong arenas.
Belong. So they would, the professional, quote unquote, professional teams would attend these localized kind of things near to where the teams live, and therefore they would start to get, well, I spoke to that top laner or that coach or the manager of that team or whatever, and it feels like there's some level of attachment to that organization and that team. Other than, because in the UK we've historically had a thing of people that are in chat are someone who works for the team. They're the player's girlfriend or
parents,
the manager's mum or whatever it is. Ultimately, they're someone who, if they didn't have that direct connection with the team as by coincidence, they would not actually support any team or that team at all. They're only there because they either are an employee that doesn't play or whatever the reason. So this is again a hard thing to get over. How do teams even create that fandom? And again, some of it is the what Jake's doing at Ruddy, right? Where actually he's just funny to watch. He's just really funny to watch in whatever way. He calls out people. I mean, and will be entertaining. Orgs are not entertaining, are they? I mean, I don't know if the orgs are entertaining.
They're not. Yeah.
No.
But I mean, here's the thing, right? Like, we could be looking back in a year's time, and DonJake could be essentially the business case. Like, hey, this is actually how you do it, and Ruddy's successful.
That's
what we're doing.
Yeah.
DonJake is the UK, but the UK buy.
No, I don't like this because I saw something on Twitter the other day that was comparing like someone like, why do we always need to do like there needs to be a comparison with other scenes? I get what you're saying as a joke, but wider than that, like, oh god, what was my point now? Fuck.
Because I mean, utilization of influencers has grown leagues, right? That's just the nature of it.
Yeah, I'd love to see. I mean, this is something that I would suggest. This is something that I would suggest to Kai anyway. Like beyond like next year, can you try you guys did a really good job, and it's ironic because you can't do it anymore. But like when Finn came on NLC, for me, that's something I need to see more of. As much as it's a bad thing for me to suggest because it harms my own job prospects. But getting people like Finn, if you've got people like someone like that, imagine someone like the Bows who's interested in LEC, he's obviously done a guest spot. I don't know what you'd need to offer him, but like maybe if you were to leverage contacts with LEC to be like, hey, maybe you're interested in this guy as a personality. Are there any people that you go to LEC, you're like, are there any people that you like maybe could see having on as guest talents, but you want to like grow them as a prospect and then like have them do NLC? There are like, I'm sure you could get a few people like that. Like someone like the Bows, if they did it and then like they like made it public that they were doing it. Like obviously like it would be, you're asking for a bit much, you're asking them to promote it. You would get like a 5k spike in viewership that day.
Oh, yeah.
Like, people would come back afterwards. You get a 5k spike, and then like maybe 500 people would come back a couple more times. Like,
I mean, if you get the Bout and Rat IRL to do a geocast on the NLC, you'll get like 30k viewers.
That's terrible. That's a terrible idea. That's a terrible idea.
Part of me feels like.
I'm saying Cadril is the content creator for Excel. Like that's the one I always talk about as a 100%. League of Legends influencer.
Bro, Cadril. The first time I ever spoke to Cadril was he followed me. He followed me because of the diss track I made for Excel, and was like, "This was really cool. Like, I'd really love to see more things like this." And he was talking like in an LEC context. Like that's probably the first thing. That's probably one of the only things he saw about NLC this year, maybe. Like, not yet to be.
So, like, just to answer your question, right? Like, sure, you can bring in sort of those big time names, right? And sure, like the Bulls is one, like Cadril would be another, but
Cadril's a way better example, by the way.
Yeah, sadly, there's not there's not a great abundance of people that can like move the needle. Like we reached out to like Sondergaard, who's a Danish streamer. He's got about 3K people. Like the only ones I see that get reach for 3K is like maybe a Swedish streamer by the name of Cookie, I think, and maybe like a Ranger, some Finnish guy. But yeah, but essentially, like there's not really too much to pick from in regards to like, hey, you said Finn was great. Ironically, at the start of this summer, myself and the producer Pascal sat down, and we said, hey, like Excel and Astralis, they're LEC teams, but really they don't interact that much compared to some of the other teams because they're an academy team. And we went to both of them. We said, look, you're an academy team in this. Can we position you as, hey, you're our team. This is our home team in the LEC. Can we do content with you? Can we get people from your organization to appear? Which is why we got Finn on the first week. But then sadly, basically LEC started, and then from that point on, it was like, yeah, okay, well, we're busy doing LEC. We can't do it. Sorry. But it's something that we wanted to try and position it is because we realized like, hey, this is a massive opportunity for you guys to corner the whole NLC market, but also like give us all a reason to watch NLC, to cheer, to sort of to have like, hey, like they're coming down from the big leagues to us, like because it was cool to have it. I actually think Finn did fucking great as well. I think he's got a great potential as a caster, as an on-air talent if he wanted to after he's done. But yeah, like it's not something that like we haven't thought about. We don't really have. In terms of the boss, I am more than open trying to get him. I would sadly feel he might be out of our range.
I don't want you to just bite down on what I'm saying. What I'm saying is more just symptomatic of a wider like thing for me.
Yeah,
like,
I mean,
approaching other people, like you need to like collate and connect attachments to other markets for me, which would be personalities. I'm basically just giving you an example of something I thought you did really well, and being like, how do you upgrade that?
Like where we're at, right? And I mean, I agree that the NLC as a product can continue to do more, but I see the NLC has done way more than all of the teams in it put together over the course of the last 12 months.
100%, but those two things aren't mutually exclusive for me. For me, the NLC needs to keep striving to do as much as possible, and if the orgs won't do it, then they're just soon going to realize they won't exist soon. And,
I almost feel
that's
though,
actually for me, long term controversial. You guys can keep doing shit and not making stuff because it just means that like you'll be gone soon. Do you know what I mean?
Do you think though that if these say our league all of a sudden like next season, right, has 30K viewers every stream, do you think these teams do any more than what they're doing now? Because I don't think the current orgs actually do any more to utilize that than they do now anyway.
Which is why I'm cordially asking anyone in chat if you want to send me 3K on PayPal so we can buy a Div 1 spot. If we get enough people, if everyone in chat right now donated $1,000, we'd have 10 NLC spots and we could just run the whole league.
And you'd do more than the whole league was doing, Jake, to be honest. And that's a big part of this problem. And that I actually don't think that these organizations would still have a fan base, even if we had 30K viewers on the stream every week. Right, I don't think these teams would monetize what they're doing any better, even if we had 30K viewers on the stream every week, than they're doing now. Hardly. They may get more from the NLC as a stipend payment because the NLC's earning more, but I don't know if they would actually do a better. I mean, maybe I'm being harsh to these orgs, but it doesn't feel like whatever they do, the way they're currently doing it and the way they've been doing it since they've been in the scene, that they're more interesting now than they were when they first joined, and that is a problem.
It's why I spoke about weirdly talking about a hard reset for the league, because no disrespect to teams that are there and not all fall into the same categories, but you're talking about teams that may have been around a little while or done their things, this, that, and the other. Esports has evolved so much in literally the past 3-4 years to a point where we talk about return on investment, we talk about monetization, we talk about fandom, etc. We need more. You get like Ruddy Esports, we need more like this, where there is a brand plan or a monetization plan or some sort of just a plan,
or a plan,
a plan around their org. And the problem is now we're a little bit stuck.
Okay, so I want to say this as well, and I don't want to sound like I'm too hard shitting on some people because I can see in chat, for example, I think Veneer, if I was to talk about stuff that Veneer did well, I think your fan on the street was good. Some of the social stuff, what I really rated, I would say you guys were the only org that was trying to utilize TikTok. I don't know why orgs don't realize that TikTok is a complete gold mine. They made a video that had it was funny comms from their players. They obviously had the added benefit of having Sahira and Baker, who are two hilarious people that I speak to. like who just are funny. They're funny guys. They uploaded a video that was like their comms with like it annotated in basic editing that any idiot can do on CapCut. Like, yeah, they made that and it got like an insane amount of viewership. Like, bro, it's so easy, man. It's so easy. Why is CJ just added me with $signs? That's not hard to do. It takes an hour, I promise you. Like, it's not much. What do you mean? It's not money. Like, I don't know why you're adding me with money. It's not money. Like, it's not money at all. Like, you can get anyone to do this for like really cheap. It doesn't take any effort. Like, you can literally like crazy idea NLC. Like, any of you orgs can go on Fiverr and you could pay like some random guy like to do it for like an insanely low amount of money. Like, you could literally do. You could outsource all of your content to some random guy in like Marrakesh for like £7. Like,
well, didn't Fnatic when they were still in the NLC?
Yes,
didn't they have Chibs on as a sub still with 1 million TikTok followers? Like literally.
I thought that's not what you're gonna say. I thought you were gonna say.
Yeah, but that was a complicated situation.
We're like, I mean, hopefully, so some of the takeaways, hopefully, people are listening to you, Jake, about the that side of things.
No, they're not listening. No one cares,
well,
man.
who
Everyone
knows?
pretends they
Maybe-
care. No one cares.
Maybe they don't, but like, there has to be. So we're trying to find actionable takeaways that anybody who does listen to this, whether they do, whether they don't, that's completely up to them. But if they're not listening to this, like, what are they listening to? You know what I mean? But there has to be actionable takeaways in which these orgs can improve. Right, these whether that's with assistance to each other. I think another big part of the UK scene is we actually have a lot of the time teams have avoided assisting each other at any point. They very much wanted to make their own. They don't. I said this a long time ago, probably like 6 years ago or something. It felt very, very much. I mean, I guess the most notorious view of this, or when I saw this obviously, was when I moved into gaming house with XL in Reading, the first, like, I guess, full-time gaming house in League of Legends in the UK for a long time. And XL weren't a big org at this point. They were not much bigger than. I mean, they're probably smaller than M&M at the time, but all we got was like. Almost slander, right? I mean, we bought Sendo at the time. Whatever you think about Sendo as a player, as his results or so on, but it was like, oh my god, can't believe they're spending money on that. Rather than like, actually, this org's actually buying players and willing to try and sell players, or trying to centralize the location of a team. Whether it's done rightly, whether it's done wrongly, there's this huge amount of kind of intricacies. But what there's been for a long time in the UK, maybe we're just like this as a culture. Maybe it's a cultural thing, but there's often bringing the ones that are trying to do things well back down and slandering that, as opposed to try and make the whole pie bigger for everyone.
I think maybe two orgs that actually do that fairly well, I think, is like Veneer and Riddle, where they have like their back and forth on Twitter, and basically like although they're clearly on all mates and on good terms, it's like kind of creating like a
rivalries
kind of
are great, right?
Rivalry.
Any kind of joke.
I'd love to see them maybe take that and do like just do a friendly match in the off season, like, and just
that's one thing that feels demoralizing for me. Like, for example, so during the Royal Cup we made like 3 videos. I think one was against Munster. We made the one that was like a remake of like the 2006 rugby advert. That's like, you know, the one that's like England, and the punchline is like, it's not about who you want to win, it's about how you want to lose. We did that for Munster Rugby because it's like, you know, rugby collection or whatever. And then they just didn't respond, or like they responded and it was like an emoji, and it was just like, do you know what I mean? Like, guys, like, this is good for you as well. Like, we've done something for you as well. Like, you can interact with this and boost it, and then like more people will watch the game, and it's not even just for us. And then I did the same for Bifrost, and then they just like, when we lost to them, they quote retweeted our tweet with like a rhyme that they'd made on Rhyme Zone that was like the most Detroit shit thing I'd ever seen. And I was just like, why, guys, just like go and tell someone to like make a quick little video for like half
they're
an hour.
not seeing it as a monetization opportunity to whether that's actual physical money or whether that's like growth of interest in the game. They're seeing that as like slander and replying with, shut the fuck up, we're better than you, we won. You know, and that's where these teams. That's where we go right back to the very beginning of this whole conversation. We talk about education. The education is not. There's a lack of understanding of that opportunity. The way you see that, Jake, as an opportunity to grow. Other people see that as an opportunity to like, I'm going to show them we're actually better at winning than they are in that particular moment, and that's the most important thing that matters.
Some people need to just, it's like James is saying, you just need to fire your social media managers, because for me, like, even beyond like not being able to see the long-term implications of that, because you need a long-term growth strategy. It's not that you've got worse ADHD than me. You're just trying to see like, oh, I'll post a video and then like make $5,000 from it in a moment. No, you won't. You're gonna get 400 views on it. Like we promoted the fuck out of our Astralis video. It's got 1K views on YouTube. We push that on Reddit, on TikTok, on everything. Like, it's a long-term growth strategy. Like, a lot of these social media managers don't understand. Like, this is your job. Like, that's your job. Like, that's literally. I don't want to sound like Roy Keane on here, but that's your job.
No,
but here's the thing. You've hit the nail on the head. You said they don't understand, right? And here's the thing. You don't have to fire them all. You just have to show them the way. You have to educate them. You have to say, hey, look, I understand this is what you think is doing is working, right? But let me show you some examples. Let me pull you up G2 social media. Let's put you, Fnatic social media. Let me show you, like, hey, what actually works. I
agree with you, and I will apologize for saying like, oh, you should be fired. That makes it sound like I'm threatening anyone's livelihood. I'm not. People make 10 quid from social media. Like, yeah, it's not. But my point is, if you can't recognize that already, I don't think the job is for you. I think these things are like.
There's a harsher point to put on this because it's something I've seen even at LEC level, let alone this level, is orgs see a social media manager role as extremely entry position, first position into a company. You become a social media manager so that one day you can get into partnerships, you get into marketing.
And all they do is write the result on Twitter, right?
Exactly.
They write that we won versus this team on this day at this time. Well done, guys. Good game.
Enough effort social media managers, good social media, and
social media managers all think they're like Suetonius, like on a little like marble thing, like on the 31st of November we conquered. Like you're not doing a history record. Like be creative with things. It's not like
I promise you, it's not difficult. If you've got above a B in GCSE drama, you can do it. I promise you. Just put a little bit of effort in.
I would like to see more effort of hiring going into these kind of positions.
The task is not difficult, right? The task is not difficult. It's the ideas that surround the task in the first place, and that's what lots of people lack, for sure. I mean, their social media strategy is to recount each result that they've got and tell their non-existent fan base when their games are so that they can not watch.
Yeah,
that's exactly what's happening.
I think there's a further one as well. Just to add on top of that as well.
Yeah, no problem.
Teams need to stop pretending they have a fan base and start reveling in that fact. Make fun content, make stupid stuff, be memey, stop being professional. Straight up, be professional with contracts and players. But outside that, stop pretending things exist. It's okay to be tiny. It's okay to be small. It's okay to be wherever you are within the business.
Be passionate.
Exactly. But stop pretending it's not there and create a social media and content plan around that.
Reputation they don't have,
Exactly.
They're almost protecting a reputation that doesn't even exist yet. They're pretending like they're Man United and they have to be
exactly. And it feels good to be a part of that. Like it's very easy to feel part of something that's like this is the strong professional thing, and you feel good for it, but it's not realistic. And I think there's a lot to gain from just kind of like accepting where you're at and just going crazy with it.
Go Froomie, you got something? Or
sorry.
Did you have something to say, Froomie?
No.
I'll pick it up though.
I've just been listening.
Then I
thought you were going to say something or trying to say. Was it something else at the moment?
If I had an actual step as well, I think that would be good. Going back a tiny bit there as well, but I think there's a lot of value to be had from, as you say, talking about orgs working together, right? So I think there's a lot to be value to had from all 10 orgs in the NLC, meeting once a month, preferably once a month, as both an owner and then like a head of content or social media or someone else, a representative, every month with the producer and coming up with united. The LEC guys do this all the time. Like the amount of rivalries that are faked because they've all come together and organised.
Because they're centralised, Grant, right? Like because they're in one location and they're almost forcefully on top of each other. I mean, I know
that does help because they're in person, but can you not do that online? Can you not?
No, you absolutely can do that online.
I've got a webcam and an IP address. I will beef any man. I will beef.
You need someone to lead it. You need someone to hold everyone accountable to being there. You need to hold someone accountable to creating actionable steps for the seven. Maybe put this on the tournament organizer or producer. It's not really for them, but like who else is going to do it? You've got to come together more and share ideas and be willing to be honest with each other, accept that you're all growing the league together. Like,
yes,
anything you do outside it is fun and it's rivalry and it's all for marketing. You're business partners. You're not enemies. You're business partners.
So there's also like, I mean, this is a complete exactly the same as what you're saying, Grant. From a business standpoint, this can filter down all the way, right? Social media people can talk to each other from the organizations and talk about kind of how do we generate rivalries against each other, like what is this kind of stuff, and then even that filters into the performance side of things. The amount of times I had a team or a roster where I would listen to a cast very briefly and then turn it off quite often, but I would listen to a cast and a kind of cast or a broadcast talk about characteristics of my team, of my players, which were completely falsified, but to create a narrative, which is fine. But they'd never spoken to me or any of the team about what the truth behind. So they didn't even get to know any of the people in the team. They were talking about how we play before we've played without ever seeing us play or even talking about us.
I do agree with you to an extent, but also it's on you to represent that, so I don't have to. I think. So for me, it's hard for me to say because as a caster, one of the things that I did when I went on LC a few times to Split was I went and did like extensive interviews with the teams because I wanted to be able to like represent well. So like Torek knows this, Zen knows this from Dusty. I went through each player, like what are they like as a like, you know, give me some ways to describe them. It's why if you've ever heard me talk about Cries, I keep calling him a high fidelity player. I don't know what that means. It's just what Torek told me. But in any case. My point is more in general. I think that's for me. I don't hear about. For me, that's like a good thing to do. But also, I wouldn't necessarily have to do that if there was more widely accessible content from those teams to see. Not even in terms of like videos or anything. If they just had more of a presence. So for me, in that instance, if you're seeing casters create false narratives, or not false narratives, but narratives that they've made for themselves, it's because the orgs themselves haven't fostered anything for me to have anything to pick the bones upon. You're allowing me to feast or famine, and there's no meal for me. Do you know what I mean? For me, like an org needs to create something outside of that for it to be a fixture that I need to create something. Otherwise,
it's got to be a two-way street. Absolutely, it has to be a two-way street for sure. But
the thing is now, for me, NLC is putting that effort in. So like from this point onwards, there is things that I think NLC can do better, and we can talk about the past, how it's been shit. That's why it's in the position now. But for me right now, NLC are delivering on certain things. They're obviously not on others. Like Freaks has been not the best TO in terms of like I had a horrible experience managing in Div 3. I know Froomie's saying a similar thing now. I know Div 2 even not great. Like with certain things, communication is always a problem. I'm not going to sit here just because I do work for the NLC and pretend that there isn't horrible things that happen with the TO that I'm not happy with. But also on the other end, there are also things that I think are moving NLC and the scene in general in a really good direction. So for me now, what I see is I don't see any orgs doing that. I don't see any orgs doing that. Like I don't see any apart from us.
Yeah, because
I'm not going to go into too much about Div 3. I was going to touch on the other point of we're saying all the orgs in the NLC need to do all this stuff. Do orgs in other ERLs do these sorts of things? Because I think if you look at any org outside of, say, Koi or Carmine Corp, they're not doing much different to what the NLC orgs do. So why is it different for them?
Because they don't have to, because they're already the growth is
so
there.
They ride
because
coattails of the other organizations that are getting the growth.
That's what they do. Like they jump on.
I don't think that's entirely true. So this is more of like we were in danger here of like glossing over this and not really unpacking this. My thing is, so other scenes, for example, like in France, have existed for a long time. They've really like built upon the fact that they had local lands, local infrastructures. That's why esports in France is so massive, especially for League of Legends. You're actually able to galvanize a local domestic market. Then beyond that, like when you talk about the inception and conception of ERLs, like in the beginning of like sponsorships, and the reason that Riot took so much interest in ERLs, people don't even like talk about this nowadays, is because domestic markets like Spain and France were able to get access to more demographic specific sponsorships, like MasterCard, for example, that Riot could never bridge the gap for. That's why so much sponsorship initially was put into those. From that point onwards, that's why the scene develops and why you have so much money. That's obviously relating to facts of, you know, nationalism and whatnot. They speak the language, so if you're French, you want to watch French League of Legends. But my point in general is the reason that they're able to have that viewership and they're able to ride the coattails, as you so to speak, is that they do more anyway. Let's not pretend that they're doing the same amount as NLC teams. They do more. They're obviously not doing way more, or what I think they should be doing. I'm not making an argument for there being an acceptable level in all ERLs or orgs, because you're talking to someone that thinks LEC orgs don't do content properly, apart from like one or two. My point is NLC is at 0. These other ERLs are like a 3 or a 4. But that they are able to do that for a sustainable business practice because the league propels them. I think it's disingenuous and a false representation to say they ride the coattails because they're allowed to. You're not allowed to. It's feast or famine in NLC. Like, don't just complain and say, but they're allowed to do it. That's like looking on the grass is greener. You're in the garden with the giant, and like if you don't make some effort, you're just gonna get killed.
Sure, and I think that it doesn't take a lot of kind of content or narratives or things to be created publicly to then that spiral into one another. But it does. So like when Gico was BDS mid laner, the whole like fucking whatever he used to say, like it was his brand was used a lot to utilize a huge amount of what the whole team was doing, right? And they're making videos, they're making content around him, even though he's like nowhere near part of the. I mean, it was pre-LEC, right? So yeah, actually slightly different, but this like small little kind of you don't need all 5 of your players to be hugely entertaining to make a great piece of content or a great kind of branding strategy around or narrative around your team and like part of what you've got. But yeah.
I'm not sure. Is there many other avenues we can go then? I think kind of the main crux really is I guess like the marketing side, how teams are putting out their content, how they're kind of.
So I wouldn't mind jumping back just one quick beat if that's possible. Obviously, Josh mentioned a lot about like sort of knowledge sharing, and I think that's going to be a major part of my own personal focus for the NLC moving forward. I was already planning on doing workshops with the teams themselves, and it's also something that I am pitching very heavily to Riot to try and enforce across the entire ERL ecosystem to try and make sure that the knowledge share is reaching all the teams in every ERL so that we can help professionalize the region, the industry sort of as far as possible. Also, just one thing I wanted to get Grant sort of, I guess, input on, right? Because obviously, Grant, like, I've known you since Last Remedy, but I've also followed your career very closely since then, and I know that you jumped from, I think it was like CLG to Splice to XL to.
God, I've been everywhere too.
Yeah. But the thing is, I remember when I first spoke, the first time I ever spoke to you, after you added me on Facebook, because that's how you were asking for
back in the day.
Back in the day, yeah. And I remember talking to you, and I remember like, okay, yeah, this guy is, he's young, but I can tell he's smart. And then just all of a sudden, you just kind of, I could see that you were very, very adept at networking and getting to get information from the right people and being able to understand how to acquire knowledge on a level that at the time was, I didn't really see anyone else doing it in the UK sort of industry. So I wonder if you could potentially give some tips about how, because obviously you didn't start with all the knowledge you have today, right? But obviously now you have
none of it,
yeah. But now you've managed to accrue it all by getting some good level positions, and you're also very adept at sort of learning new techniques and stuff, right? But at the same time, you've also been able to get yourself in front of the right people and have meetings with those people, and I guess, can you talk to, like, if you were one of these teams, right, and you didn't know where to start, like, what would be your strategy to start talking to the people that you think might be able to help, like in a like a hypothetical scenario? Because I think it's a very good question for you.
I can't remember who, but someone here's almost already answered. So the good news is there's a lot of good people in esports at high level, whatever, who want to help, who've been, we've not all been here. Nobody's been here too long, right? And I think there's a lot of value for them to gain from knowledge sharing, to see opportunity of people come through. So we don't have a lot of quality of staff, even at the highest level of esports right now. That's why it's been so many people move up so fast. So top tier orgs, if you put S tier orgs, have a lot to gain from knowledge sharing, because that's going to create a new set of staff coming through that they can then bring in the future that's quality for them. So they want a knowledge share. So I think people are, I don't know if it's afraid, I don't know what it is, but needs to be more willing to reach out to whoever they idolize or view, this, that, and the other, really dig in and find out behind the scenes who's working on what and learn from that. And just be willing to have these conversations. I think you'd be more surprised and you realize how many people are willing to answer that conversation. There's not a system of you must give value and I must give value, but actually people willing to share in the first place. And I think number two is you just must be willing to accept that you may know nothing, or that you still know nothing. Like, on the grand scheme of things, I know so little compared to majority of businesses out there. In esports, I still talk about how little I know. I just try and utilize what I've been told so far. I've only learned from mistakes and or what I've been told. Nothing's come from me. It's just the way you have to be in terms of your personality, almost like no ego. Just be willing to listen, learn to everything and everyone, and then try and collate and put it together. I don't know if it's not about risk taking. It's not about trying to dive into that. It is just about being willing to open yourself up to new knowledge by reaching out to so many people out there. And I think back in the day and even now, it's all I always talk about how like everything I do in performance, I learned from Peter Dunn, for example, who's the EG head coach at League of Legends. Like he just taught me everything. I know nothing about performance, right? But you just have to find the right people to be willing to learn from, and they're willing to help you. They are. So there's not much more to it. Like there's not some special skill to it. You just got to get out there.
Well, that's where your workshops work, Will, because the people that aren't reaching out are almost enforced into a situation where if the right person stood at the front that's willing to share what they know and they know some stuff, actually, I mean, you're talking, you're kind of preaching to the choir a little bit, and I mean, depends on how much then they want to take, but like right now there has to be a willingness from the orgs to swallow some pride and grow on where they are, whether it's we're going to fucking completely restart this next 2023 and we're not going to be the whatever of old, the Dusties, the Riddle, whatever the org was of old. We're scrapping this. We're going to actually take some. This hasn't worked. We've been the same. We've stagnated for 3 years, 4 years, whatever. Something needs to be different. We're going to see the growth that the NLC has made in the last 12 months, and we're going to grow alongside that to make one larger pie called the NLC, not accept that we're just going to be a tiny little like a tiny playground where there's a group, one little click over here and one little click over there, and that one bitches at that one and that one bitches at that one, and that one's trying something new, they must be shit. That one's trying that one signed this player's really bad, like why would they sign him, like, and that's happened a lot of times. That what they haven't realized sometimes is that they're all stood in that same little shitty playground still, and no one's actually escaping to like the wider field, which can be a much bigger pie, and it's been shown by the NLC that there is growth to be made within this scene, right? Whatever way you look at it, like we said, the viewership's grown 300-400% in 1 year of you guys running it. So the orgs need to now do their bit one way or another, and that's not like a critique. That's really a case of how there needs to be actionable difference for these orgs to survive. If ROI is if ROI is the issue, you have to take actions that will increase chances of ROI. That's it. You can't just sit and just hope that the NLC is going to produce enough followers that they're going to pay you more than you're spending each year. That's not going to work.
My thing is, just in general, it's like TLDR. I think we focused a lot on like how shit orgs are, and that's all fine and dandy. But I would like to see pushes from TOs, NLC, whatever, get involved more in like local infrastructure, like schools, university, create some sort of analog there whereby they can get more access into it. That isn't through the model of something like SNG, just like creating like a false marketing scheme or whatever. Yeah, I'd like to see more ability for League of Legends in the UK to actually be created in terms of new viewership. I think I talked about the distinction earlier between creating new viewers and utilizing current. I think there are methods and strategies that should be made, which is like Officer Naughty was touting earlier, events and free shit. Like a lot of the time, that's good. Getting advertisement via the client. Just bring more people into the fold, and that's like a lot of what our brand strategy is. Like making sure that people that don't know what NLC is like can watch it. For me, ideally, what I want Ruddy to be is just like a very like much a hub spot for a lot of London people. I love the idea that in like a year or so, our goal and with a lot of our plans is to get involved in more local infrastructure here, and make it so that a lot more people from London that don't necessarily even watch League or watch NLC are watching it and supporting us. And I think more teams. More TOs need to be getting. I think there's a good point that was raised as well. I think we should maybe lax off on allowing teams to attend LANs and stuff like that as well. I'd like to see that. That would be good, because I think that more so than even the UK. I think obviously we've come from the UK perspective, but I know from like Sweden, Denmark, all of these places like Telia League and stuff like this. I know that a lot of those orgs are kind of strangled in being able to like nurture their own local scenes by their inability to compete in these things.
But I mean, like, so I mean, this is slightly another thing. We don't want to go off too many tangents. We haven't got much time left, but back in the we'll call it last remedy days, whatever, Every team attended it.
No
every
one calls
team
it that.
attended it. Right.
Sorry.
Only I called it that. Just every
It was way more
team,
popular.
every
In
UK
your-
League of Legends team attended Insomnia, for instance. Right.
Yeah.
Pretty much all the teams in the scene. And Insomnia was a LAN event away from the league in which the top UK teams competed against each other for a cash prize. Right. Ultimately,
So
and
much more
everyone was in person, and that tournament actually meant something because it wasn't 20 teams of 5 mates that went to Insomnia playing against each other. It was and this is when none of the orgs could afford to send any of the players. None of the orgs funded that hardly, but there was teams
Everyone
that
found a
competed
way.
to make that. Yeah, everyone found a way to turn that tournament into something that was actually like a prestigious tournament to win.
I remember when I rocked up to IG Fest, and it was me, Synergy, Nix, and a couple of other players, and we were just looking around, and it's like, okay, all of the ESL teams are here. Like, if we can just break into the top 8, that'd be huge.
That'd be a great achievement.
And within like a year or so later, I was managing Enclave, and like we were the only team from I want to say that was still probably ESL days that turned up. And it was just the decline happened so quickly. But LANs used to be such a big event. Like, they were massive. And then all of a sudden, people just stopped going.
Yeah, everyone started focusing again on that sort of short-term ROI. Like that's what it became again.
Yeah.
Because it's a shame, because like
I'm done with the
remember
ROI chat, man. On the ROI chat.
But you remember some of those people on those Broxer played on that Insomnia stage.
Hold on.
Cadril, Larson,
There's so
like
many people,
massive
man. Like
names that we could have used.
Smiley, Lawson.
So yeah, like
Yuki,
people,
like,
plenty of ERL players. So yeah, it's just a shame that we lost that for whatever reason, and that was an opportunity to build content. That was an opportunity to social media in the days where we were still learning.
It felt like that's the biggest gathering of gamers in one place in the UK each year, right? Multiple times at one place. And it's almost like a little mini hub in which actually UK teams can create
network and work together.
We understand.
This is an org thing again. How can I go to Insomnia on a big man thing now? How can I go to Insomnia? I'm sitting at lunch with Hyrav. I'm looking at Hyrav. I look at him. I look at me. I'm thinking, how are we here with the team? How's my man just eating Nando's over there? He's not brought his team. Like, how could there's so many UK orgs that just don't end up going? Like, where are you? Like, there's no one was at Insomnia this year. Like, where have you guys been?
I mean, part of that is the like. I mean, the geographical location of those players being all over Europe, right? And I mean,
it's
geographical
location.
They're already spending. These teams are spending like. I mean, that team's probably spending like 25k a month on its salaries.
Mate, Rapstar's in Birmingham. Just give him 10 quid and he'll play. I promise you. Give him a keyboard.
Yeah. I mean, but the geographical location of their current roster is what I mean, right?
You don't need to send your current roster. Like, at least have a presence or whatever. Like, you can get UK players. Like, we didn't have our current roster. Like, we just.
And I think that was part of the thing. Is that some of the teams used to actually be, because they were primarily made up of UK players who were volunteers at the time, and they weren't high paid players. Actually, you'd go with they're almost your mates.
I won't say which org it was. I won't say which org it was, but there was an org that was in negotiations to speak to 5 people that went and played at Insomnia. It's one of the teams we played against. I'll say which team it was. It's the team that has Sin, Jamsu on it, that play in like Div 2 NLC now. So, like, decent players that at this current level of Insomnia could compete. They came third. There was a team that negotiated with them. You all know the team as well. It's quite obvious, actually. But they negotiated, and then they basically got to a deal whereby the players were paying for the free. The org would break pretty much even. In the sense of I don't know what the exact deal was, but it was a thing where the players had already bought the tickets. It would just be a case of the org gets majority of the prize pool, but then plays for the hotels, something like this. But it ended up being the case the org broke even. They then didn't do it because they were like, oh, we want to get something from it. We want to get money from it. And they just ended up cancelling it. I've heard so many stories of that being the case. Why would you not just go if you're going to break even? Just go. What's the point?
Yeah, I mean, in lots of cases, the orgs didn't break even so if an agreement is made beforehand with 5 players, they're going to pay for the team's going to pay for the hotels and tickets. Even if they win the tournament, it doesn't break even, right? A lot of the time.
No, the prize pool dropped a lot over the years, didn't it? as well.
The prize pool versus expenditure is always a loss, right?
Yeah, the tickets went up and price.
Yeah, but it's like it's another Ouroboros moment, isn't it? Because the prize pool goes lower because less people are interested. So it's like...
Yeah, exactly.
Is there a...
Sure, I mean, we've gone off on a tangent for sure, but lands is definitely an interesting thing, which again extends to what you're talking about with the whole Ruddy thing of the localization.
It's not even about Ruddy though. It's more like lands is endemic of a wider problem, which is a lack of localization. If you were to then get involved in schools and galvanize new players into the market, convince people to start playing League of Legends at grassroots level, then get people towards the inception, you would get more people turning up to Insomnia anyway. That's a byproduct of my general point, is that you need to get more involved. Orgs need to do that, and then like Riot needs to do that as well. Like,
why don't we all just pool for a booth at LAN? Get an NLC booth at LAN for all the orgs. We'll all just chat about the NLC with the kids that are walking around the LAN halls.
I mean, my point is that there aren't really any kids at the LAN hall. Like, my point would be more in general. Like, if you localize more,
people at the LAN hall. Just chat to them. Get a booth. What's this?
True. I mean, the army do this. To be fair, I was at the Insomnia, and they were making me make the decision between Afghanistan or solo queue, and I thought they're pretty much the same anyway.
Yeah, but I mean, I remember XL had a booth one year, and it was like constantly. Yeah. But every time, like, it's constantly popping. Like, if all of the orgs or the NLC just pull for a booth, you can reach a lot of audience at a lot. Not just at like Insomnia, just like anywhere that can do it.
It is one of the benefits of. Yeah.
Does this show a wider? And I'm bearing in mind it's 9:10, so I don't want to start a whole new conversation. But for me, is this where there's a concern with the fact that we're talking about localization, lands, the fact we need to invest in, almost English players, the university, whatever. Is being an NLC product instead of a UK product and whatever the Nordic product is a bad thing? Because even though it's all at least English speaking, is that separation actually quite bad for the UK scene? Because we're not building up UK stories. We're not encouraged to go to lands because people are abroad.
I think
we're not
you should
getting
be able
UK
to build those
in.
stories within that, though.
Okay.
I mean, if I went on the NLC, the way the organizations are right now, I wouldn't know if it was an English team playing versus a Norwegian team, or like, I wouldn't have a clue. It wouldn't matter anyway. So, but there can be like this is the team from Northern England or whatever, the Manchester squad, and actually like they're against, I don't know, whoever. But there can be like actual rivalries based on where, and people that watch the NLC then can attribute themselves to something that they relate with. Maybe they're Swedish, maybe they relate to some team in wherever. But there's like there can be, you need to want to, people that are just general people who watch the league should have things that they can attribute to actually why they watch a
100%.
certain team or why they want to follow a certain team, and they are not. There's no distinguishable difference between X team and Y team, and that's a problem.
I think in the past year we've taken a step back as well. When we had the original amalgamation of the two leagues and we became the NLC from the UKLC and the Nordic Championships, we still had the individual subdivisions across the 6 nations that were included under that umbrella. Now, in the last year, obviously, that got scrapped and it just became NLC, Div 2, Div 3, etc., etc. Back when we had the UKLC and the UKL below that, I felt that there was still quite a strong connection to the UK league, regardless of, it not being a major ERL anymore. But ever since we've become just amalgamated into Division 2 and below, we've lost that even more.
No, I disagree.
So I will.
With that?
I also highly agree with this as well.
I don't. So I'll go quickly and then Kai. I don't think that when UKLC was a thing, there was anything that particularly tied UKLC to being of a UK identity, unless you talk about LAN finals being at the where was it again? The big thing that XL used, Twickenham.
It still gave more of a platform to UK players because you were forced to have UK players.
You had to have residents, right?
Yeah, you still had to have the residents.
What I will say, though,
UK players a platform to play.
Is
but I don't. Yeah, go on, Kai.
I actually think that's one of the main reasons why the NLC as a concept just failed. right? Because the majority of the entire player base and fan base were in these regional leagues, and everyone had the identity of, hey, I'm in the UK scene, I'm in the Finnish scene, I'm in the Norwegian scene. And unless you were in that Division 1, you had no identity of being part of the NLC region or scene. Because there was even a Telia Masters, that was even a barrier before you even considered that you're part of the NLC ecosystem. How many players or coaches or orgs that are in UKLC or UKL or any of the Telia esports series genuinely thought that they were part of the wider NLC ecosystem? I don't think any of them had that identity. And I think that's why the viewership ended up being so low for Division 1 in particular. I will say, I don't think that this current system is the actual way forward either. I think it works out great for the German Prime League, and and for that region in particular. And I think that we need to come up with a brand new system for the NLC. But I know that people always harken back to, oh, it was great to have, these national leagues and that national leagues, but all it did was just create further division and not enough unity for the actual NLC overarching structure, in my opinion. And I know that I'm not necessarily in the majority in that camp, but I've always felt that was a massive hindrance to the NLC actually getting off as a concept.
Sure.
But also, just sadly, I'm gonna have to probably dip anyway, Lee, just because I'm cut for time. But you guys can feel free to continue. I just want to. I'll just wrap up just quickly myself, but I'll let you guys continue. So it's all good. I know obviously there's been kind of a lot of criticism for teams, although I will say that I've actually personally loved working with all the teams in the NLC so far this year, and all the ones that might be in next year as well. They've all the owners have been genuinely really nice people to work with, and they do listen as well. They're not actually as stuck up or like just willing to not accept anything. They actually want the help as well. They want to grow. They want to be a partner in this kind of thing that we're trying to build. And I have told them, hey, I do think there is light at the end of the tunnel, and I think this year has been a good first step in saying, hey, you know what, maybe the NLC isn't completely dead as a region. We can actually boost the numbers for once and show you that, you know what, there can be light at the tunnel, so long as we actually nurture the scene. I don't think it's going to happen overnight. I don't think it's going to happen over 2 years or 3 years. I think it's going to take us a long time to get to where our promised land is, or where even some of the expectations is with the community, if I'm honest. But people say the grass is always green on the other side, but the grass is green wherever you water it, in my opinion. And so I think we just got to keep endeavoring to do that, right?
That's cold.
And with that, I'm out.
You've created a direction, Will. I think Will and the NLC has created a direction that this can actually move in, because there hasn't been direction before. There's been a different direction for 10 steps 100 times, right? We've taken 10 steps in one direction, then someone said we got to go in a different direction, then someone said we got to go in, and actually we ended up back right at this beginning until before this last year. If Riot the standardization of the ERLs, and then we have a tournament organizer that we're going to stick with for a long period of time, that has direction that everybody is rowing in the same kind of the route as, that there's something here that is possible to expand and grow into something much bigger than it ever has been before, which I think that the hope that NLC has kind of seen in the last 12 months should be hope enough that well, okay, we're doing a bit of a soft reset of the orgs that are within that system now, but listen to the kind of direction it's going in, and let's actually have 10 teams that are committed to that direction, and see how far it can go. And maybe we can actually get somewhere, but there has to be actionable differences on what's been done before, and while pushing in the same direction as a tournament organizer, not pushing against it.
Definitely. I think we'll wrap up then. I know everyone's got to go now. But yeah, hopefully that's been useful, because I think just final point then, like for any of the past seasons to have teams suddenly dropping out, this actually was the one where before anything of this happened, it felt like the most optimistic, basically since I've been involved really. It's the first time that the viewership was going up, things were looking like it was improving. So I think it's maybe just taking advantage of that now, like we said about these different ways teams can market better.
I think
have the identity.
There's a weird position for me. Everyone that I feel like there's a lot of doom and gloom with everyone looking at these orgs that are like leaving. I'm completely fine with these orgs leaving. Like they don't do anything. Yes. Like as much as like
it's a reset.
My then thing is like I don't think the orgs coming in are going to do anything. So that's where the doom and gloom happens. But I like the position that UK League is in at the moment. I don't like it, but I like the direction it's going in.
I can see some good things happening, like for sure.
I think I spoke about how like this is we need a reset. We've kind of naturally, organically got one now. I think, the academy teams leave, I don't think is a bad thing because they were inflating salaries and costs whilst not adding anything in terms of content and viewership. You've got some of the other teams dropped out who, perhaps aren't as much as you spoke about. I think this is a great moment where we've seen, as said, the NLC product is being improved through William and team. And now we have at least some new orgs and new opportunity orgs that we are way smaller, right? It's way smaller now. That's okay. Now we can actually build with the product in mind and give it 3-4 years, like LFL did, like Spain did. Like it took them 4 or 5 years to get there with a fairly core roster of about 5 or 6 teams. We now have that opportunity. Let's not try and be more than we are. Let's take it year by year. And actually, I think this is a really, really good moment for the NLC to grow into something now. But
100%.
we must take these actions away and push now that we've spoken about.
I'll agree. For me, it's just about like 100%. It's just think long term and don't just go, oh, we're not going to get anything, so we won't bother. Like, bro, why do you own an org if you're not going to, like, what's the point? Just disband the org. Like, disband the LLC. Throw it away. Like, if you're not going to do anything, like, what are you doing it for? Just to, like, bleed money every year? Like, no, seriously, though. It's madness. Like, that's madness.
They are.
If you're in it for the money, it's not going to happen for 10 years. So don't be in it for the money. If you want to be in it for the money, go do something else. If you're here for passion and care, now you have an opportunity.
I just want to do some match ratings here. Just kind of, much like Arsenal Fan TV did. We spoke about the veritable status of an Arsenal Fan TV model in terms of the fan on the street from Kai. I just want to say, Grant Rousseau, you have run this midfield like an absolute engine. This is incredible. N'Golo, this is quite possibly, this is like when Jack Wilshere bossed Iniesta and Xavi in that Champions League game. This is mental from you. Lee Jones, you're there, mate. That's all I can say for you. It's a 5 out of 10 for me. You're about as useful as a moderator as the NLC ones. Kaiprioska, it's a good 7 out of 10 from you, mate. 7.5 for me. For me, you're an underrated member in this conversation. You're much like I'm trying to think what a good example of you would be. You're like a Willian. A Willian would be good. A Xhaka. I think you're a Xhaka. That's potentially good. Crane and Froomie. What's gone on here? 10 words in 2 hours. It's mental. You probably come to about a 0.75 between the two of you. What's going on here?
It's not bad praise from the second coming of Officer Naughty, to be honest.
Much like Phoenix, I arose from the ashes of Officer Naughty to do much better than him already. So anyway, and Josh Ferndog as well, incredible. 7.5 for you, 8 or so. For me, you're a stalwart left back. You keep the direction going. You're like a kind of like a Trent Alexander-Arnold of player agents, is what I would put you at. Right. You're able to put the long balls. No one thought you'd be able to play. No one thought you could get Zico. Is it you that got Zico into LFL?
Yes.
That's a long ball, mate. That's a long ball. I think he's great, but that's a long ball. You're Trent Alexander-Arnold for that, mate.
Thanks, mate.
There we go.
This is my favourite ending to a podcast.
I can't believe I've been called the second coming of Officer Naughty. You know how insulting that is?
The second coming of Officer Naughty.
The second coming of Officer Naughty.
Everything that you've already done, man. You're the second coming of Officer Naughty.
So in what way do I try and do things that he's done?
You just took the mantle. You just took the mantle.
I think we'll have the wrap up.
So yeah, cheers for joining.
Well, at least I did something. I did something that he's done. At least I fucking did something. Way!
All right, cheers for coming, everyone. Cheers for watching. Thanks for the chatters and that as well. And for those asking, I know people are saying about if the VOD's gonna go somewhere. The VOD will go live. Don't worry. And hopefully there's some useful snippets in there as well.
Anyway. Thank you, Will, for coming, mainly because a lot of times tournament organisers have not come to this type of stuff because they've not wanted to be ahead of critique, right? There's been lots of people that just say shit about other people, but ultimately you've come and defended all of the stuff that NLC's done and shown the progress that it's making. So, I mean, that's really like to have the opposing viewpoints is the whole point of this kind of thing. It's really useless without it. So, good job.
Yeah, no, I love engaging in sort of opposite viewpoints, and I'm not above criticism. I try to do my best, and I take very much the same mentality as Grant. Everything that I think I know to be true today might be all proven to be wrong tomorrow. So, yeah, it's good to do this once in a while. Yeah.
Cheers, guys.
Right. Thanks for everything.
Thanks for organising, Lee, as well. Appreciate it.
Cheers, guys. Catch you later.
Bye, guys. Follow Ruddy Esports on Twitter. It's Ruddy Corp, RUDDYCORP. You can find me as well. Thanks, guys.
All right, we're off. See ya.